Chat, if you're trying to get better at Smash, just go to medify.gg/@SimeetsKing or check the YouTube description. I'm the best coach in Melee and Ultimate. I can pretty much help you get to the highest level possible. Just check the 4 and 8 training plans, single sessions, or whatever. Or just hit me up if you just want to hit me up individually. Okay, there's a new video. Is it a good video? I want to show you something, chat. This actually shows really good proof.
On the other, you have some of the most dedicated players.
This is me losing to Ocean. Remember when I mentioned earlier that whenever I would play a tournament, it would be a huge crowd cheering against me and they would be yelling in my ear and I couldn't hear the game?
Of Nintendo.
Here's a video example of this, of what I have to deal with all the time. My entire fucking career. This is what I had to deal with. You could see a video example here, but imagine this hundreds of times. Imagine this hundreds of times. Just being the enemy because you win too much. This is what I had to deal with my whole career.
One would assume
what you don't see on YouTube.
Yet their relationship with each other is notorious for being fundamentally broken. The subject is a contentious one, with blame being cast on both sides. To Nintendo loyalists, the Smash community is a collection of entitled players stuck in the past, incapable of enjoying a game unless it's on their terms.
I'm a competitive Melee player, and this is the only thing I can make love to.
To competitive players, Nintendo is an unnecessary antagonist, a company that prioritizes control over its intellectual property and branding above all else, even at the expense of its most passionate fans.
I don't give a shit what they're telling us. I want to see a police officer come and take the CRTs out of the venue. I want to understand how you stop us from playing a video game in America.
The details change, but the dynamic stays the same, and it has for over 2 decades. If history tells us anything, it's that this conflict seems to be irreconcilable. But the question is, why? What is it about Nintendo and the Smash community that has placed the creator at odds with arguably the most die-hard members of its player base? To truly understand this conflict, you need to understand Nintendo, Sakurai, and the dedicated players who built a community around a game that was never intended to be competitive. Many mistake this story as a simple disagreement over intellectual property and copyright, but the true story of Smash is one of what it means to create art, and what happens when that art grows far past its initial intentions. Nintendo as a company predates video games entirely. Founded in 1889 in Kyoto, Japan, it spent its first years producing Hanafuda playing cards.
That's 100 years before, Chad, that's 100 years before I was born, holy shit.
Video games entirely. Founded in 1889 in Kyoto,
I'm 1989.
It spent its first years producing Hanafuda playing cards, but the early days were filled with turbulence. Japan in the 1900s proved to be a difficult environment for a humble playing card company. Major wars, financial struggles, and at one point, the threat of nuclear destruction. Kyoto was an initial target for the atomic bomb during World War II, spared only when Secretary of War Henry Stimson personally convinced President Truman to remove it from the list. Despite the difficulties, the company persisted, and through a pivot into the newly budding consumer electronics industry, Nintendo would go from surviving to thriving. The first video games emerged in the 1950s as hobbyist projects, only really shared among a niche community of programmers and academics for the joy of it, but they quickly captured the attention of entrepreneurs who saw something else entirely, the potential for a brand new entertainment market. The first commercial video games arrived in 1971, and by the end of the decade, the Silicon Valley bred Atari 2600 had struck gold, dominating the American home console market and turning video games into a cultural phenomenon. Nintendo had quietly entered the industry during the 70s, but their first big splash came in the early 80s, and arguably helped define video games as we know them today. First-time game designer Shigeru Miyamoto led the development of Donkey Kong, a pioneering arcade platformer that became the highest-grossing game of 1981 and 1982. Building on that success, Nintendo released the Famicom home console in Japan to widespread acclaim. The plan was to bring it to America through a distribution deal with Atari, but negotiations collapsed when the Donkey Kong port appeared on the competing ColecoVision. With Atari pulling out, it was going to be up to Nintendo to find a way to distribute their games in the industry's largest market, but complications in the US console scene wouldn't make it all that easy. 1983 is perhaps the most infamous year in video game history. Market saturation and a flood of poor quality products eroded consumer trust until the American home console sales collapsed almost entirely. Video game consoles were now being written off as a cultural fad, destined to join pet rocks in the footnotes of the decade. With consumer sentiment at an all-time low, Nintendo's distribution plans had to change. If they were going to succeed in America, they needed to distance themselves from the failed consoles of the past. Their answer was a rebrand.
Witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System.
Rob!
Come to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot.
Oh my god.
Nintendo's strategy was calculated and deliberate.
Rob, this is where he comes from?
As the Nintendo Entertainment System arrived in the American market in 1985 with a slick new redesign and a suite of toy-like accessories, intentionally positioned to feel nothing like the failed consoles consumers had already rejected. But the hardware was only part of the strategy. In order to truly win the hearts of the American consumers, Nintendo knew the winning strategy was by offering what the crash market couldn't: a consistently excellent gaming experience. Nintendo had a theory about why the crash happened. Bad developers had flooded the market with low-quality games to make a quick profit, and consumers had lost faith in the medium entirely. Their solution was to take control of publishing, to ensure that only quality games would carry the Nintendo name. Former Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi articulated the philosophy directly. He believed that truly talented game designers were rare, and that without strict oversight, inferior products would inevitably flood the market and destroy consumer trust all over again. In his view, Nintendo had no choice but to monopolize. Internally, this philosophy created something remarkable. Nintendo hired exceptional talent and gave them room to build. Shigeru Miyamoto would return, taking his Donkey Kong characters and spinning them off into
You know I have a picture of Miyamoto? Look. This is from, I think it's 9 years ago? It was 2017 or 18. It was either, no, I think this was, this was E3 2018. So that was 8 years ago. Isn't that cool? I also have a picture of Sakurai, and this is me of Sakurai. In Japan. Well, it's a blurry image, but on the original, it's better. Yeah, see?
For Mario Brothers, the flagship title of the new console. Mario, Zelda, Metroid, some of gaming's most enduring franchises were born in this era, from a company that genuinely believed quality was worth protecting. The launch of the NES single-handedly revived console gaming in America. Consumers returned, and Nintendo would go on to become the dominant player in video games worldwide. And with that dominance came leverage. Third parties wanted access to develop on the platform and sell their games. Nintendo was willing, but only on their terms. Every game released on Nintendo hardware.
Bro, this game is so difficult.
Third parties wanted access to develop on the platform and sell their games. Nintendo was willing, but only on their terms.
This game called Lolo, Adventures of Lolo, is an NES puzzle game. I played Lolo 1, 2, and 3. I got really far toward the end of the game in all 3 games, but I could never complete the games. I never looked online. I was too prideful to look online for the answer. But without cheating, I was never able to beat these games. It was the very super late game of the games. It gets too hard.
Every game released on Nintendo hardware required an official seal of quality.
Quality seal. The seal assures you the best games, the best graphics, the best accessories. Without the seal, it's not Nintendo.
Enforced through a lockout chip that could only be obtained through a licensing agreement and a substantial fee. This approach was seen as unnecessarily strict by many developers, particularly in the West, but compliance was not optional. Nintendo owned the market, and if you wanted people to play your game, you had to play by Nintendo's rules. In response to Nintendo's ownership of the industry, some competition would emerge. Sega would come out swinging with the memorable anti-Nintendo marketing campaign, an iconic mascot, and a willingness to work with third parties that Nintendo simply wouldn't match.
What Nintendo?
But it wasn't enough. Nintendo doubled down on their strategy with the Super NES, better hardware, and a host of massively successful first-party titles that kept them.
Oh, dude, these games are my childhood. These games are my childhood.
Down on their strategy with the Super NES, better hardware, and a host of massively successful first-party titles.
Oh,
that
so
kept them
good,
firmly
dude.
At the top of the industry during the.
Not many people played this one. DKC 2 is one of the best games ever, dude. Dude, they do not make games like this anymore. This is a masterpiece. Like, this game is a masterpiece.
That kept them firmly at the top of the industry.
And this one too.
Early 90s. It was during this golden age of 2D gaming where a young video game developer named Masahiro Sakurai enters the picture.
DKC2 is the best Donkey Kong game by far. It's not close. If you haven't played it, get on that right now.
Sakurai began his career at HAL Laboratory, a second-party studio with close ties to Nintendo.
It's way better than the
His
first.
debut as a game designer came at just 19
And the first
years
is good.
old with Kirby's Dream Land, a platformer built around a simple but intentional philosophy. Make a game accessible enough for players who found Mario too difficult.
You gotta get on that,
while
Eric.
offering enough depth to keep experienced players.
Go for
engaged.
100%.
The
Go for
character of
100%.
Kirby was Sakurai's own
By the way,
placeholder
it's
design,
actually
never
102%.
intended to be permanent, but the team found former built around a simple but intentional philosophy. Make a game accessible
Don't bother with
enough
3,
for
it
players
sucks.
who found Mario too difficult while offering enough depth to keep experienced players engaged. The character of Kirby was Sakurai's own placeholder design, never intended to be permanent, but the team liked it so much that they chose to keep him. Kirby's Dream Land sold well, and Sakurai...
Apparently Kirby was never... Okay, apparently Sakurai... Apparently Kirby was never supposed to be permanent. Isn't that cool? Kirby is never supposed to be permanent. Oh, dude. This is Dragon King, chat. Dragon King is the first character in Smash. Look, this is Dragon King, which is a character in Remix, obviously with a different moveset. But Dragon King is literally the first character in Smash. Sakurai was making a fighting game, like a different type of fighting game. He was created before Smash, and then most likely they made him. I'm betting they most likely made him Cat and Falcon. Like, I bet you what happened, because I know that Dragon King, this character that you see right here, this was the first character in the show, in Smash. But then it wasn't called Smash; it was called something else. And then it was called Smash later. It was changed into a Smash game later. And then I'm pretty sure what happened is they probably just made him Cat and Falcon, and then they just made 11 other characters. You see, I don't think this is a good way to explain tilts. I think they should have said, move the stick slightly. If they just... Dude, they did such a bad job explaining what tilts were. I remember the manual in Smash 64 when I was like 8 years old, and I had to figure out what a tilt was, and I didn't know how to do tilts consistently. It just felt inconsistent. I was like, how do I up tilt? I remember being 8 years old not knowing how to up tilt. I had to figure it out on my own.
Fighting games were incredibly dominant in the 90s. Games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat had become a worldwide phenomenon. But Sakurai saw fundamental barriers in the genre for new players. Standard 2D fighters typically featured restricted movement and demanded that players memorize complex input sequences to pull off combos. The genre would reward players who were dedicated to practicing and honing combo sequences, but punish newcomers who didn't have the time or patience to learn the ropes.
I actually think that's a big problem with fighting games. It actually means that if you don't YOLO a game, you can't really get into a game. Like, if you're trying to play a new fighting game and you don't want to spend a lot of time learning a certain move, you can't really play the game for real. With Smash, it's kind of straightforward, and you're mostly learning your hitboxes and stuff. I kind of like that about Smash, because it's one of those things where it's easier to pick up for a newcomer, but it also has, arguably, I would say, even more depth than other fighting games. So it's better than fighting games in both regards. It's easier to pick up, and it also has more depth because there's more possibilities of the microspacing you can do. That's what I think Smash is just like the perfect game.
Sakurai had ideas on how to iterate on the genre, and he would ask his friend Iwata to help him with the programming. Together, they created Dragon King, the fighting game.
Oh, Dragon King was the fighting game name.
Together, they created Dragon King, the fighting game. This was a prototype for a 4-player platform fighter featuring a
4 Cat and Falcons on Battlefield, which, dude, Battlefield isn't even in the game. I think, wait, it might be the fighting. I think Battlefield is in the game as a fighting polygon level. I think you fight the fighting polygons in Battlefield.
They created Dragon
But they, for
King,
some reason, didn't put that into the main game, like as a selectable stage.
the fighting game. This was
Or maybe it's Dreamland. Maybe it's Dreamland. Wow, the platforms are really high up here. And I actually think, actually looking at this again, this looks like Dreamland.
A percent-based knockout system rather than the traditional health bar. This uniform fighter.
Oh, that's their up tilt, dude. Look,
Percent-based knockout system rather than the
look, chat. Look at the white Cat and Falcon. He's doing the Smash Remix Dragon King up tilt. Look, dude. When they made Smash Remix, they have a character called Dragon King who literally has as many moves as they could see from these videos. The Remix team researched these moves, and then they tried to simulate it closely. That's pretty cool, huh? Because I remember playing Remix, that's Dragon King's up tilt.
health bar. This unique damage system combined with simple inputs.
Oh, and that's his back air, look!
The traditional health bar. This unique damage system.
Look, that's Dragon King's back air. They really did a good. They really simulated it. Isn't that cool? If you ever played Smash Remix, it's almost this. It's very close to the same.
Combined with simple inputs, allowed the game's combo system to rely less on input memorization, but rather through improvisation based on how the opponent was launched. The two would take the prototype to leadership. It was well received internally, but would have to be shelved due to a lack of available developers to work on it. HAL Laboratory was deep in the development of Earthbound 64 and couldn't spare the resources.
Wait,
Dragon
has
King
this ever come
but
out?
would have to be shelved due to a lack of available developers to work on it. HAL Laboratory was deep in the development of Earthbound 64.
Wait, is that a... Wait, I don't remember there being an Earthbound 64. I've never played the Earthbound series. It never came out? Oh, man, that's so sad.
He made a new prototype featuring 4 Nintendo characters. Sakurai developed quietly until this prototype was polished enough for a second look.
Oh, shit, I didn't know any of this. This is crazy.
Was that he was unsure if he would be able to get players to attach themselves to a brand new roster of original.
He developed it. Sakurai really wanted his idea to work, so he developed it secretly.
Characters, making the marketing for his game potentially difficult.
I didn't know any of this.
The
This is
solution
hype.
was one he had been turning over since the project began.
That's badass.
When he pitched the idea to Miyamoto, the answer was an immediate no. The thought of Nintendo's flagship characters fighting each other was too controversial, too far outside what the brand stood for. But Sakurai wasn't ready to take no for an answer. His creative vision was Nintendo's greatest icons duking it out, and in secret, he made a new prototype.
He did it in
featuring
secret.
4 Nintendo characters. Sakurai developed quietly until this prototype was
That's so
polished
cool.
enough for a second look. And when the time finally came for Miyamoto's approval, Sakurai came clean with what he had created. By all means, Miyamoto should have been furious. Sakurai had directly defied a clear decision, built something he'd been told not to build, and done it in secret. And to top it all off, 2 of the characters featured in the demo were of Miyamoto's own creations. But in a rare moment of relinquishing control, Miyamoto would approve. Whether the prototype had finally shown enough merit to change his mind, or whether Sakurai's persistence had simply worn him down, the result was the same. The green light was given to Sakurai's prototype. Needing a title for the new project, Sakurai would get a suggestion from his friend Iwata. That title was Super Smash Bros. Word of the new game began to circulate internally. Developers and creatives at Nintendo loved what they saw, finding the game incredibly fun and addicting. Nintendo's sales teams were
Dude,
quite confused.
have you guys seen the commercial?
Internally.
Something's gone wrong in the happy-go-lucky world of Nintendo. Introducing Super Smash Bros., where all your favorite characters go toe-to-toe in one 4-player star-studded slam fest, only on Nintendo 64.
Wait, there's another one? Oh, no, this is something else. Actually, I want to see what these other ones are. Huh? I used to fight computers on this stage a lot. And you know what I did once? One time what I did is I fought a glow-in-the-dark Samus. So I put a Samus on level 9, and I would change all the settings on my CRT. And what I would, like, the tints and all the little options you can change. Like, there's, like, a whole bunch of different options. I remember tint, but there's, like, a whole bunch of different options. Brightness and a bunch of things. I basically changed the settings so much in the CRT that I did, like, irreversible damage to it. I didn't know how to revert it back. But I made it so you could only see the lava and Samus's visor, and it was extremely difficult to see anyone else. And I would have to, like, fight her in a really, really difficult condition. So that's what I did when I was younger, to challenge myself. This is, like, the year 2000. It was like a year after Smash came out. I was doing this to challenge myself in the year 2000. I was, like, 11 years old. I'm 37 now, for comparison. And this is what I was doing when I was 11, to challenge and entertain myself. Pretty cool, huh?
Basic the game was.
I really want people to play.
Casual gamers and critics alike. Smash wasn't the first platform fighter, but it was the first to take the genre into the mainstream. Sakurai had nailed the core gameplay loop into something that resonated with a wider audience. While other fighting games of the era were competing with each other for the most complex fighting system, Sakurai would instead focus his attention on an approachable control scheme that could be intuitive and dynamic for players of all kinds. The utilization of beloved Nintendo characters also gave the game enormous crossover
100%.
appeal. Gamers had the opportunity to settle childhood fantasies about which icons would win in a fight through chaotic fun. Despite being released fairly late into the N64's life cycle, Super Smash Bros. Would go on to be the 5th best-selling game on the console at around 5.5 million units. Nintendo had to admit it. Sakurai's little experiment had worked, and they came back to Sakurai with a proposition. Fairly late into the N64's life cycle, Super Smash Bros. Would go on to be the 5th best-selling game on the console at around 5.
Is the 5th? Oh, I actually never played GoldenEye. I actually never played GoldenEye. I think Smash and Mario 64 are by far the best 2 games on Nintendo 64. Like, I think those are like the... Oh, actually, Ocarina's up there, too. There's no way GoldenEye's on the same level as that. I mean, I didn't play it, but I'm reluctant to think FPS could be as good. I think Smash and Mario 64 are the top 2 games. Wow. Wait, actually, Smash, Ocarina, and Mario 64 are all of a case. I can't believe GoldenEye is the 3rd most sold game. That's insane. It really? Is that for real?
Nintendo had to admit it. Sakurai's little experiment had worked, and they came back to Sakurai with a proposition. The Nintendo 64 was nearing its end, and development on Nintendo's next console, the GameCube, was already underway. They needed a killer app in time for the release, and wanted Sakurai to make a new Smash that was bigger and better than the first. The average development cycle for a GameCube game is estimated to have been about 24.5 months, although usually longer for AAA games that are expected to have higher levels of polish. But Nintendo wanted the new Smash to be ready at launch, and gave Sakurai a deadline of just 13 months. Hindsight says that Sakurai was set up to fail, but he didn't need hindsight to tell him that the odds were not in his favor.
He made Melee in 13 months, bro.
Because layered on top of impractical logistics was something equally deadly: expectations. Smash on the N64 had been an experiment, and it wasn't entirely clear if it would resonate with fans. But with the game being a big success, the bar was now much higher. Whatever Sakurai put together next wouldn't just define his franchise, it would also help determine the commercial fate of Nintendo's next generation console. And that console had a launch date, November 2001. So with no time to spare, the development of Super Smash Bros. Melee would begin. Fall 2000. Sakurai and the team at HAL still don't have access to proper dev kits. To compensate, they work on a GameCube emulator that can't replicate the full power of the GameCube. They're building for hardware that they don't truly have yet. January 2001.
Wow, that's crazy.
Sakurai finishes storyboarding the opening cinematic, but at the cost of having to cancel his planned New Year's vacation.
Oh, this is cool.
The opening cinematic, but at the
Oh, I like this.
January
The storyboarding?
2001, Sakurai finishes storyboarding the opening cinematic.
They talk about Sheik's starting position and where the moonlight is, exaggerating the sparkles, all the details ever. Like the grass sways in the gentle waves. This is pretty, based on a lake. This is pretty cool.
But at the cost of having to
make Zelda transparent since he blends into the sky. Make our colors muted. Wow, holy crap. Volume's low? Oh. Let me max it.
cancel his planned New Year's vacation.
I didn't know the volume was low. You're the first person to say that. Wow, wow, this is a lot of... I mean, I guess that is the work that goes into it, huh?
He's pulling all-nighters at the office, with some of his coworkers even finding him asleep at his keyboard. Day by day, the fatigue is visibly mounting. Spring 2001. Recording sessions for Melee's music and sound effects begin. During the orchestral session for the opening cinematic, Sakurai is in the studio. He's there to make sure that every note is exactly the way he imagined it in his head. This is the first thing that the player will see, and it has to be perfect. He's using all of his mental energy to concentrate, and moments later, he collapses.
He collapses?
He's in the hospital on an IV.
What?
Fatigue had finally got to him, but without a second thought, Sakurai gets back to work. He can't afford any more setbacks. May 2001. Melee is shown to the world at E3. The reaction is nothing but pure hype. Fans who managed to get their hands on the demo leave buzzing. Even gaming icons like Sonic Team CEO Yuji Naka and Metal Gear creator Hideo Kojima approached Sakurai personally, asking to get their characters into the game, but it's too late in development to make that happen. The expectations are enormous, and Sakurai feels the full weight of them. In a blog post on the early Smash Dojo, he writes, "People's expectations are higher than ever."
There was a Smash Dojo in 2001? Dude, I did this. I was on the Smash Dojo for Brawl back in like 2007, looking forward to the Smash Dojo updates of the game to come out, which was Brawl. I remember checking that all the time, and this is 19 years ago. I didn't know they had it in 2001. That's way different in 07. I'll look at it. Sometimes they would mention, oh, Sonic was released, or they would show off an assist trophy for Waluigi or some other stuff. It would always be something new every day. Always something you look forward to every day. Or I think I don't remember if it was every day or every week, but it was something like that.
Contribute to the future of this new hardware. I am entrusted with characters that have been raised by many who came before me. In every way, I think this will be the last time I tackle a project of this scale. Anyway.
Ah, that's a lie. So, so that was a lie. This will be the last time I tackle a project of this scale.
Trying very hard. August 2001. An early build is used for a tournament at Space World 2001. Fan excitement only grows, but the game still needs significant polish, and November is approaching fast. A delay is looking increasingly likely. Sakurai's good buddy Iwata, now promoted to a C-suite and on his way to being CEO, goes back to his programming roots to help with debugging. It would be the last time he ever wrote code professionally. A favor for his friend. One final ride. Delay is
This is
looking
cool.
increasingly likely. Sakurai
Wait, so he did turn. So the first tournament ever
an early build is used for a
was
tournament
here.
at
Can you guys imagine how much Melee would have sold if the GameCube just sold better? This is the only console ever where Smash is the best-selling game. I'm not sure if Brawl outsold. I think Mario Kart and other games were always more, but this is the most sold. I think Mario Kart's usually Nintendo's best-selling game. But in this case, it's Melee. Though, by the way, chat, you see these games right here? Metroid Prime, Double Dash, Melee. Have you guys seen my website? When I was in the year 2002, 3, 4, and 5, I finished this I started this when I was like 12 or 13. I started this around age 13. I ended when I was 16. I made a website of over 100 pages of the stats and frame data of everything you could ever want to know competitively. In every game, from F-Zero GX to Double Dash to Metroid Prime, how much HP this has, what's the frame data of this, what's the damage power of this, what's the best strategy to use against this, anything you could ever want to know. I did this before I started turns. I created this entire website before turns. I'd say about 95% of this website was finished before my first turn. Pretty crazy, huh? If you guys read this, you'll be like, you have a whole new respect for me if you read this. By the way, I've only scrolled halfway down. This is the other half at max scoring speed.
Game on the console, moving over 7 million units worldwide. From a production standpoint, Melee brought Nintendo's icons into the next generation with full style. Graphics were a generational leap. The soundtrack was packed with certified
the
worldwide.
graphics of this game, dude, you don't understand what it's like going from N64 to this. Going from the Nintendo 64 to this was fucking insane.
Production standpoint, Melee brought Nintendo's icons into the next generation with full style.
Graphics
were a generational leap.
This is like a godsend compared to N64.
Under titles released on the GameCube, Melee finished as the #1 selling game on the console,
no going back
moving
again.
over 7 million units worldwide. From a production standpoint,
This is
Melee
so
brought Nintendo's
much better
icons
than
into the next
64.
generation with full style. Graphics were a generational leap, the soundtrack was packed with certified classics, single player offered a wealth of new diverse modes, and the roster had grown to 26 characters, more than double the original of the N64 cast, each one rendered with a level of detail never seen before. But the biggest leap was in the gameplay engine itself. Sakurai and his team had taken the simplicity of Smash 64 and pushed it into overdrive. Animations were incredibly fluid, and the core movement mechanics were crisp and responsive. Combined with a new GameCube controller, playing Smash had never felt better. Yet through all the enhancements and added complexity, Melee had still nailed the core design principle of being a game immediately fun and accessible for all players.
I'll do it later.
It was a game that was intuitive from the moment you started playing, while simultaneously rewarding players who were willing to put more into learning its complexities. And with a game as fun as Melee, many players were happy to dig further. What started as living room sessions between friends slowly became something else. Dedicated players began to take Melee more seriously, and in the hopes of proving their skill, began investing more time to understand the intricacies of the game engine. What they discovered was that a supposed party game aimed towards casual players actually had the potential to be a
Bro, when they say we, they mean me. This guy's literally describing what my website, bro. Let me show you one example of what I did. Jigglypuff Sing Escape Speed Formula. T equals parenthesis 2D plus 95 minus 7B end parenthesis plus W. This is the type of stuff I would figure out when I was in middle school. By counting frames in the most difficult way imaginable. Do you know how hard it is to get the frame data by using pause? Every test takes forever. It's obnoxious. This is the stuff I did when I was a teenager, years before my first tournament. I put Albert Einstein in the caveman era. Or, you know how back then they had to use these complex methods using, like, the pyramids or whatever to, like, map the location of the stars with very limited technology? That's kind of what I was doing. Using the bare minimum of possible technology, but squeezing it to the extreme of what is humanly possible by a human being on Earth. Squeezing it to the end, like taking a rag, and you've squeezed the rag 100 times, but you squeeze it another 200 times until there's not even an atom of water left. You know what I'm saying?
Melee was already fast, but with the physics exploits layered on top, players could push the game far beyond what was...
Dude, this video is on... Dude, Perfect Dark. Dude, I don't know if you guys have seen Perfect Dark. It's one of the best videos ever. Let me take a quick moment to show you something. This was so impressive, I think everyone should see it. Do you know how insane this is for 20 years ago? I don't think I could do this today. No. It gets better. It gets better. I've never encountered anybody in tournament who could play like this. This is 20 years ago. I think this might be the best combo video of all time. I think it's even better than my own combo videos. This one, the Link combo here is fucking crazy. Pay attention to this one. I think this is my favorite in the whole video. This one right here. Let's watch that again.
The release of Melee coincided with the growing adoption of a communication tool that was fundamentally shaping culture, the internet. In 2000, a 13-year-old under the alias Gideon would create the Smash World forums, a place for Smash enthusiasts.
This is the website. This is the website that I used all the time. This is the website I would use all the time. This website and Game FAQs. But what happened is where Ken hasn't that good. Nah, I surpassed both of them at the end of 06. I 4-stocked Azen and I 3-stocked Ken at the end of 2006, but there's no video footage of it. However, I did beat them in tournaments many times after that. There's video footage of some in it, but not of my 4-stock. The 4-stock match is not recorded.
Shortly after the launch of Melee, the Smash World forums would be rebranded as Smashboards. Passionate players flooded in, as they had an outlet to discuss strategies, techniques, and experiences with the game that they love so much. With Sakurai and the developers never accounting for the game to function around advanced techniques that players were uncovering, much of the culture around Melee, even in its earliest
KDJ was giving me trouble, but I was better. So the way it worked is Korean DJ, PC Chris, me, Ken, and Azen were all around the top and Chudat. So we were all like the top 6. I had a more shaky start at the beginning of 2006, so I was ranked 6th for the year. But my improvement rate was crazy. Like I had a crazy improvement rate throughout the year. I finally beat Ken Fox. I took Ken in Game 5 in the middle of the year, beat Ken Fox the next tourney at the second to last MLG. And then I was playing everybody in friendlies with my new main Marth, but I wasn't sure if I should main him or not. So I was playing everyone in friendlies to test it. I was beating PC Chris almost every single game in Marth vs Falco. I 4-stocked Az in our only Marf Ditto, and I 3-stocked Ken in crew battle. When we both started 4 stocks on FD, 3-stock versus 3, and I 3-stocked him. After that, I realized, okay, outside of KDJ, I'm literally destroying everybody else. But you know who I ran into bracket? KDJ. So, yeah, that sucks. Because, like, he was, like, my counter. Where, like, I would be better versus the field, but he'd be better versus me. Overall, I was the best in the world in 06. But I wasn't... This is not meaning I'm invincible. It's just that, like... If you look at me versus the field compared to anybody else versus the field, in terms of success rate and how much I'm 3-4 stocking them, like, I'm clearly, like, the best. But I didn't get a chance to prove it until 07.
Techniques and discoveries wouldn't be named from the game.
No, I actually 3-stock Ken and Cruz with Marf, and then for some reason went Fox and Bracket. But this is the first time, you're not going to believe me, but my controller broke. You know, I don't know if you guys noticed, because this is 20 years ago, if you try to up throw, dash back, up air, you get stuck in your dash back animation if your controller is bad. And then Marf does falling up air and then up tilts you. But it is so sad. Because I practiced so much for the final MLG that my controller actually broke 2 weeks before, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks before turn. I remember Cactor was there with me in Philadelphia. We were training together. I didn't even know controllers could break. But the joystick got so shitty over a course of time. This is why fobs were invented. Because with a fob, the pod doesn't, the stick still gets looser, but the pod doesn't, like, devolve. And, basically, with a fob on UCF, you're basically good forever. But in vanilla Melee, you just have to learn a new control all the time.
Combo list, but rather from a player who had discovered and shared it. Fox and Falco's down special reflector is intended as a defensive tool to redirect projectiles.
Fun fact, that move does not reflect until frame 4. I lost in tournament to a Samus player. I think it was either Hugs or Wes or Oro. This is my first year competing in 2005. I lost to one of them because I tried to reflect their charge shot, and it didn't reflect. I got the shine out, but shine hits on frame 1. It doesn't reflect till 4. So there's a gap where you could see the shine but not reflect it and you get hit by it. Yeah. Pretty funny.
Players would come to realize that the move's fast.
It hits on 1. It reflects on 4.
Actually had incredible offensive
Yes.
capabilities.
Yes.
Player named Matt
So you could get shot by a projectile during the first 3 frames, even though it hits you on frame 1, physically.
Would refer to the use of the reflector in this way as a shine. This unofficial term would catch on in Smashboards and become common nomenclature in the scene for years to come. But perhaps DZ's most influential contribution to early Melee was not through the digital space, but rather through the announcement of a real-life local tournament. On April 6th of 2002, Matt would make a forum post about a tournament he was planning on hosting in his Northern California
I actually didn't know about tournaments the first few years. You gotta remember, when I got Melee, I was 12 years old, just before my 13th birthday. Like, I was still 12, like, turning 13 in a few months. So of course, I couldn't go to tournaments right away, and I didn't know tourneys even existed right away. Somehow, I didn't find out until several years later. I don't know how it took me years. I somehow found out the frame date of, like, everything in the game before I learned turns were a thing. Isn't that crazy? Pretty crazy, huh?
Matt had never hosted a tournament before and was worried that nobody would even bother showing up. But to his surprise, over 40 players saw the advertisement on the boards and showed up to his house to compete. And with that, the Tournament Go series was born. The West Coast wasn't the only region forming a competitive scene. Other regional scenes were beginning to simultaneously form all around the country. These tournament scenes were incredibly fragmented, each coming up with wildly differing implementations of the rule set and metagame. Even the presence of items in competition was still variable, with many on the East Coast seeing them as unfair, while the West Coast preferred to use them. However, the growing hotspots were only isolated for a short while. Smashboards gave the newly forming scenes a place to talk, even if it was mainly to talk smack towards other regions. Before long, players began traveling to rival regions to prove that their skills were superior, and narratives began to form around the players in their rivalries. This would all culminate at Matt Deasy's Tournament Go 6. What started as a humble house tournament was now a full-scale ordeal hosting over 100 entrants, and not only would it feature the best players from across the entire country,
I wasn't doing turns
but
at them.
the entire world. A selection of Europe and Japan's best players would make the trek over to the US.
The thing you gotta know about me, I was always itching for competition. If you read my website, look, if you read my website, I was a kid who I feel like I had a lot of intelligence and talent, and a lot of desire. But like I had my biggest thing was desire. Like I had a lot of itching desire. You could even see I'm looking for people to play an Xbox. Look, Look, right here. Look at the sentence. If anyone wants to challenge me in Melee or Halo PC version or Halo 2, then please IM me, instant message me, or come to New Jersey and play me. I got Xbox Live March 31st, 2005, if that's not the most autistic sentence you ever read. I'm not exactly what we call a bad player, either, so play me sometime. And then there's stuff right here. Gotta remember, I'm a teenager. I'm like in middle school here. This is why I always tell people, if you're motivated, you can just achieve whatever you want. Okay, maybe not always, but you'll get further than you think you can.
These players, separated by literal oceans, were finally together and truly able to put their skills to the test, showcasing the pinnacle that early Melee had to offer. The tournament itself was a huge spectacle with wildly unexpected results. The reigning American champion Ken from the West Coast was eliminated early. It was Azen from the East Coast who defended the tournament from Japanese top player Captain Jack. But the real winners were the fans, who got to witness the early juggernauts of the game battling it out. Tournament Go 6 was a major success. However, it would come at the cost of DZ, who would retire from organizing Melee events immediately after. In a reflection piece on Smashboards, Matt detailed how hosting such a large event took a toll on him. Matt expended a ton of his own time and money to be able to host the event, and still being a young adolescent with very few resources, his parents had no choice but to step in and help. While his dad begged the neighbors not to call the cops on the 50 Smash players residing in their family home, Matt's mom would pull Matt aside and exclaim to him that if he truly loved her, he'd never throw another Melee tournament again. Matt would part ways with the Smash community, but his early efforts and personal sacrifices would not be in vain. He and other early tournament organizers had created a blueprint for what a proper Melee tournament should look like. In those early
I wasn't even attending tourneys at this time. I think it was around 2004. I think 2004 was the first year that I learned that tourneys existed. I learned tourneys existed in 2004, and I attended them in 05. February 2005 is my first.
days, it was all for the love of the game, with little to no incentives or outside support to make the ordeal of organizing events worth it.
Actually, my real first tournament wasn't that. My real first tourney was one that I was too late to enter. It was MLG Philadelphia. I'm pretty sure it was MLG Philly. It was in the year 2004. There was players like Wes and Neo in attendance, and I watched Neo's Roy beat Wes's Samus. It was insane for that. Like 2000, that was insane because we all know Roy sucks. We even knew it back then. But yeah, that was crazy to watch. And me and Ninja, which was another teenager, a person similar to my age. It was me and Ninja. We were doing doubles. We were beating Azen and Husband. Azen and Husband were teaming, and we were beating Azen and Husband. And we never even teamed before. That was my first time playing other people. We were winning in doubles. It was his Sheik and my Fox. That's pretty cool. No, like it's a ninja. It's not the same ninja. It was a teenager kid who just he was actually pretty good, but he quit after like a year, and I just kept playing. A lot of people I think were pretty good and had potential. They just stopped and I didn't. And because I never stopped, I kept improving. But we were beating them in doubles, and everyone watching was like, "Who are these people?"
Wanted to see if they could foster it into something greater.
You know how cool that is, as like a middle school kid?
Major League Gaming, or MLG for short, was an organization
Being
with a
recognized
newly coined
like that, it's
esports
so cool.
variety. Their goal was to host and
First
produce
time,
gaming
lifetime, you know?
competitions across various titles, including
It's a special
fighting
feeling.
games. And with Melee sitting as the most popular game on the GameCube, MLG co-founder Sundance DiGiovanni became a major advocate for adding it to their circuit. This would be officially done in 2004. Rather than building a tournament scene from scratch, MLG would outreach the existing grassroots.
I would
scene.
ask people to drive me. At first it was my parents, and then I just asked people nearby, like Fat Velocity, Cactor, and others. I always looked for carpool. So it was parents first year, and then mostly I'm looking for carpools after. 2005 was mostly parents.
Rather than building a tournament scene from scratch, MLG would outreach the existing grassroots scene. They would hire trusted community members to assist with tournament organizing, rule set creation, documentation, and production. In this way, MLG could maintain the grassroots footprint while still utilizing their production and resources to increase the scale. Before long, Melee's little scene of poorly written forum posts and garage tournaments would transform into a more professional setting.
I don't think I'm a robot. I just think I didn't have anyone to play. Okay, wait. Okay, you asked, is the Smash Stalker accurate on how you portrayed me? I think the idea of like, oh, I didn't have talent, this and that, I think that's very unfair. I think it's super unfair because I really think it was just that I didn't have anybody to play. Like, I don't think anybody else except me would have gotten as far as I did under the idea that I didn't have anyone to play. Everyone else had the luxury of playing with other people, usually good people. I had to fight computers because I lived in the middle of nowhere and I was young and I couldn't travel. I don't think their representation of me is accurate or fair. I understand why they call me that, because I was robot, because I had the ability to practice text code in my room a lot. And it was like, oh, I lost to mind games and stuff. The more accurate translation was that I was not fortunate enough to live where I could play people. And everybody else, they got to train against each other. Chudat, Azen, and Ken, they all played each other. Ken and Isaiah, they played each other. But, you know, like, stuff like that. I didn't have that. I think nobody else would have made it as far as me. They wouldn't have put the work in. And there's only so good you can get by playing alone. That's what I think the real truth is, chat. So let me talk at the final MLG. The MLG before the final MLG, the one before the final one, I actually beat Ken 3-2. But then I had to fight KDJ, who was like my counter. And I lost to him. And I don't remember what happened after that, honestly. And then the final MLG, I practiced a lot for the final MLG. But what happened, here's the thing. Nowadays, people have FOBs and UCF. Back then, we were on vanilla melee of random controllers. I practiced so much on my controller that the controller got significantly worse in the last 2 weeks. And when I tried to do the inputs for up throw up air on Marth, you couldn't even dash back. It wouldn't let me dash back. I would get stuck in dash back animation, and Marth would just do falling up air, and I'd just die for no reason. And that's actually one of the reasons that I was like picking up Marth at the same time. And I was like working on Marth as like a side project. I was getting really good. I played Azen in the final MLG, won Marth Ditto, and it was a friendly. I 4-stocked him. Then Azen went on to play Ken a few minutes later, and he took that same Ken to Game 5, even though Ken won. I played Ken in crew battle, East Coast versus West Coast crew battle. It went the same way as Crazy Return, 3-stock versus 3-stock on FD, and I ended up 3-stocking him. That's the first time I 3-stocked him, but it wasn't put on YouTube. It was on like MLG.TV or something. And then I was playing PC Chris over and over in Falco versus Marth. You know, his Falco usually beat my Fox. I was beating him either every game or almost every game. Like, I was handling him. In bracket, I went Fox against Ken, which is a huge mistake, and I lost. Even though I 3-stocked him with Marth the same day. And I was like, why didn't I do that? I don't remember which one happened first. I don't remember if the crew battle was first. And then I fought KDJ. I fought Hugs, actually. I beat him with Peach and two other... I rotate characters. But it was at that moment that I realized, oh, wow, I'm just gonna main Marth. And so I was excited for the next tournament, but then I had to wait months until I could prove I was the best player. But I think I was secretly the best player at the end of 06. Like, I wasn't better against KDJ head-to-head, but I was better versus the field. Like, if we all had a round robin where everyone fights everyone, I would come out on top. And it wasn't until 07 that I got to prove that to the world. But I think it was true at the end of 06. Yeah, that's honestly the accurate lore, if I'm being 100% honest.
Circuit in 2006, but perhaps the beauty of it all was that MLG could coexist harmoniously with the grassroots scene, because while MLG could offer sponsor-backed prize pools and professionalism, much of the birth and growth of Melee culture was still occurring through online spaces and local tournament scenes. The largest Melee tournament of 2005 was not an MLG event, but rather a grassroots one. Melee FC3 featured a legion of...
I was only at FC6 and FC...
for an entire
okay, so this is FC3. I wasn't at FC3. Oh, Killor! Dude, I played Killor at MLG. I 3 and 4-stocked him all 3 games in a row. We played Marth versus Puff. He was considered the best or second best Puff. We did tournament at MLG in 2006, the first MLG at the start of the year. I ended up 3 and 4-stocking him all 3 games. But it wasn't recorded, so nobody knows except me and him. Only me and him know, because nothing was recorded back then. And FC3 was the first FC. I wasn't in attendance. I was at FC6. I was at FC6 and FC Diamond. FC6 was in 2006, and FC Diamond is 07. But FC3 must have been either 2004 or 5, and I was not at this one.
It was here that the legendary East Coast versus West Coast crew battle went down, finally putting a temporary end to the ongoing debate of which side of the country had the stronger players. This period of the MLG circuit combined with the large-scale grassroots tournaments is now coined as the golden age of competitive Melee. Players like Ken, Isaiah, Azen, and Chudat would become household names in the world of competitive gaming, and many of Melee's future stars took interest in the scene around this time.
Oh, this is me!
Competitive gaming, and many of Melee...
Oh, I think this is the MLG where I beat him. This is, I think, if I remember correctly, this is the one where I beat him. I fought him at MLG Anaheim, and he destroyed me, but then a few months later, I fought him again at MLG New York semifinals, the second to last MLG at the end of near the end of 06, and I won the rematch.
His future stars took interest in the scene around this time. Competitive Melee was gathering a lot of attention in the budding world of esports, and perhaps what made it so interesting to onlookers is how a game marketed to the everyman was actually quite intricate. A common experience of Melee's early competitors was to assume that they had the game completely figured out, only to show up to a local tournament and get destroyed by players utilizing techniques that they didn't even realize was possible. Players with a true competitive spirit were made aware of the endless possibilities offered to them by the game engine, and players looking for fun and connection were greeted into a vibrant and unique community with the rare opportunity to be a part of influencing the culture. Melee would even earn an invitation to the Evolution Championship Series.
Bro, you want to know what happened at EVO, bro? Let me tell you a story about EVO. There was 3 tournaments. EVO East 2007, EVO West 2007, and EVO World. EVO East 2007, I had to fight PC Chris, Ford, and a few other good players. I ended up beating him pretty solidly and winning that tournament. I think I only dropped like 1 game the whole tournament. EVO West 2007 was like the same. I don't remember if me, PC, and Chu split, but I won that too. And, but there was no videos of that one. And in EVO World, they had to fight me against Mango in a best-of-1 match on Dreamland, and I wasn't allowed to ban a stage, which means I couldn't ban Dreamland. Imagine getting best-of-1 against my Marth, and it randoms FD. That's basically the same thing. And there's nothing you could do. You just got fucked because you weren't lucky. Or because you're unlucky, and there's no counterplay. The counterplays get luckier. that's literally what happened to me. It was so bad. Oh my god, so sad. Thank you, Mr. Wizard, because Mr. Wizard's the one who made that decision. He doesn't know anything about Smash. He made that decision. I love this intro. Kirby doesn't change.
The trailer is perhaps considered one of the greatest E3 reveals of all time.
I think Brawl has the best intro of all time. I think Melee's is second best, but Brawl is number 1.
Into an updated, more realistic art style, signifying a leap into the next generation.
The opera was so cool.
2006 would feature the unveiling of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the next title for Nintendo's new console.
This game, can I just say, this game is so underrated. I understand that the low tiers are unviable, but if you just look at it as like the top half of the cast and view it that as the whole game, it's actually a really good game. There's a lot of skill involved in it. The thing is, the newer games, they kind of like removed edge guarding. They made the combos kind of like more like, how do I say, you're not really creative with the combos. It's kind of just like you do your combo and everyone does it or they don't. It's not like you hit them and do micro spacing and frame traps. And there's so much input delay and buffering in Smash 4 and Ultimate that I really feel like it nerfs skill expression. In Ultimate, you kind of just do like the same solve thing. In Brawl, it actually felt kind of like Melee. I know Brawl gets shit on a lot because it came after Melee, and any game that would have come after Melee would get shit on. But Brawl is actually better than Smash 4 and Ultimate. I honestly think it's better than Smash 4 and Ultimate. I think it's more skill-based, and I think one of the reasons it's more skill-based is because there's the combo system, the frame trap system, the edge guarding are all better, and the input delay is significantly less severe, and the buffering is less severe. This means you can make meaningful reactions and decisions all the time. Brawl Ices was really bad, but I think Brawl Midnight was very skill-based. It was very similar to Melee Marth, where you do frame traps and edge guards and combos, but some of the characters, except Midnight, were really boring. They really just take a projectile, and they camp behind the projectile. Or Brawl Ices is literally worse wobbling. So there are some characters that are really toxic, but I think Brawl Melee is insanely. It's literally Melee Morph. Dude, Subspace was so good. I think the adventure mode in Melee is actually okay. Subspace was the best one-player mode because of how big it was. Okay. Low-key, World of Light with no spirits is the best. I know this is gonna sound crazy. World of Light and Ultimate, if you do it with no spirits, it's actually the best. Because it's actually very challenging, and the boss battles can, like, some of them can take up to 4 hours of retries to take, because it's really intense. It's like playing, like, imagine a super hard Dark Souls fight, like the hardest Dark Souls fight the hardest boss you've ever fought in your life. And that's basically what World of Light with no spirits was. Like, you have to hit the bosses hundreds of times, they hit you twice, you die. Because you're supposed to use spirits. For me, that's not the intended way to play. I thought that was the best. Subspace Emissary was really good. It was super good because it was just so big, there was so much content. But I also really like Adventure Mode in Melee, but the only thing about Adventure Mode is it just wasn't very long. Like, you beat the game in 10-15 minutes, right? But, like, in Subspace, you're literally spending the entire day to beat the game. You're spending the whole day to beat the game, as opposed to 15 minutes. So, obviously, Subspace is better because it's way more content, but I think Adventure Mode was really nice for what it was. Like, it was really fun for that 15 minutes, especially on the first playthrough. I think all three of them have good merit, just differently.
Online, Sonic the Hedgehog, courtesy of Yuji Naka.
Oh, chat, I was gonna main Sonic. Did you guys know that before Smash, back in the middle of 2007, I think Sonic was announced in the Smash Dojo somewhere around mid-2007. And I was, like, looking for updates all the time, okay? So when Sonic got announced, I immediately thought he's gonna be my main. You know why I thought Sonic was gonna be my main? Because I realized that in Melee, being faster is an advantage. Like, it's so good to have speed. And I really, truly believe that. And to be fair, Sonic was an above-average character in this game, and then a really broken character in Smash 4, and a really broken character in Ultimate. So I was kind of correct, but, you know, they didn't... The way they tuned him in this game, he was more of, like, a timeout character, instead of, like, you know, overrunning you like that you would in Melee. But that was going to be the first character I was going to look into maining. But then I tried him out, and I'm like, eh.
His long-standing offer was finally ready to join the fight, allowing gamers to settle their Mario vs. Sonic fantasies. Gamers were hooked, but perhaps nobody was more excited than competitive Melee fans. As the most dedicated cohort of the Smash fanbase, they had every reason to believe Nintendo and Sakurai were going to build on everything that made Melee great. This was going to be part 2.
Chat, the first time this game came out, I was testing it around February 2008. When this game first came out, I actually tried Marth. I didn't try the other characters, I just got to try Marth at a friend's house. And I was like, wow, I hate this game. This game sucks. Because I was comparing Melee Marth to Marth and Brawl. And he couldn't do any combos except landing fair side B at low damage. Like, you'd be lucky to get, like, one move to link into another, ever. And I only knew the game in terms of, like, comparing Marths, because I was, like, really hardcore trying Marth. You know, at that time, I was, like, YOLO maining Marth at that time. So, but I didn't really get to try the other characters. So my first impression was awful because I hated the Marth comparison. Then when I tried Midnight, I'm like, oh, this is Marth. Flying Marth. Flying Marth.
But when they finally got the chance to play,
was that Giga Bowser? Wait. Oh, yeah. Dude. Final Smashes in this was so cool. Dude, Final Smashes now are so boring and lame. Back then, you could literally control Giga Bowser and Wario Man. Like, you could play as them. Now, Bowser just punches the whole stage, does 40, kills you at 40%. It's like, it's so boring, right? Isn't it way cooler to play as Giga Bowser and Wario Man? And Super Sonic, like, you could control them as actual unique characters. They're OP, obviously, and they last, like, you know, only, like, 20 seconds or, I don't know. But it's way more fun, right? They should have kept that.
This is going to be part 2 to their favorite.
Look, you control Giga Bowser. They should have kept that. Why would they change that? That was so cool.
Video game.
Dude, if I ever get in a position with Nintendo like this, I'm gonna be telling these things like change the whole engine, change all the Final Smash. Like, there's so many things they messed up, bro.
Chance to play it in 2008, it became immediately clear that Brawl was anything but that.
Oh, dude, Ice Climbers. Okay, so Ice Climbers weren't really present in the game the first few years. Ice Climbers didn't come into play as like a major character. I'd say around 2012, 13, and 14. It was basically the last 2-3 years of Brawl. I think in the last 3 years of Brawl is when Ice Climbers came into play. They were considered the second best character to Midnight. But while Midnight is like basically the coolest character in the game by far, Ice Climbers are the most lame character in the game. While Midnight actually fights you, frame traps you, combos, edge guards, and fights you like a better version of a Melee character, kind of like a Melee Foxmar fusion, Brawl Ices literally is a more broken version of wobbling, where they literally just hide behind a blizzard wall, get the percent lead, and they only go for 0% grabs. And if you don't approach, then they just hide behind a blizzard wall. So the game came down to whoever got the lead in the beginning, and it was really boring. Regardless of if I won or lost the match, it was boring no matter what. It's so sad. You can't even have fun winning. Because after winning, it's just like, okay, I did my 9 to 5 shift. Rather than, oh, that was a fun battle. I think Brawl, but if I'm being honest, I do think Brawl is better than Smash 4 and Ultimate. I know Ultimate has more total content, and if you're gonna value it based on content, then yeah, I can understand. But I do think Brawl was more skill-based than the games after it. Like, any game that came after Melee is gonna look bad by compared to Melee. It's just unfortunate that Brawl is the one that came after Melee. Like, in the sense of, like, its reputation. Like, if Smash 4 came after Melee, people would react the same way. If Ultimate came after Melee, people would react the same way. That's the problem. PM was amazing. In fact, the top 3 best Smash games is actually Melee, PM, and Brawl. Those are by far the 3 best Smash games, and honestly, it's not close. That's why I played those 3 the most. Well, at this point, I didn't play... At this point, I've played Ultimate way more than PM. But I had a big advantage. I'm not going to lie. I had a big advantage in PM because a lot of the PM characters was very similar to the Melee characters. They just changed certain attributes to certain moves. And they added new characters. So I did have a big advantage in PM by already being good with a lot of the cast in Melee. I could play like half the cast in Melee really, really well. And that gave me... That really helped me in PM. So I do understand my own bias, but I still think that what they had as a goal, which was to make Melee more accessible, like... Led's dash a bit easier, dashback, which is very similar to UCF. Basically, it's kind of like how UCF makes Melee like UCF and FOBs make Melee more accessible. It's easier to play good. PM kind of does that. You don't have to worry about dashback because the dashback's super good. Led's dash is a little easier. You can also turn runner jump and like do other like. It was a more accessible Melee, and I actually think that's the perfect game. I understand that like Melee is more skill based and stuff, but like. I don't think it's a coincidence that there was a specific point in time, I think late 2013 or early 2014, where PM was actually the biggest Smash game. There was a sliver of time where PM was surpassed even Melee, and Melee also surpassed Brawl. I think 2014, the order was PM and Melee were the biggest, and then Brawl went down to third. But the year before that, like Brawl was still the biggest in 2013, except the last few months of the year.
Super Smash Bros. Brawl was an even bigger commercial hit than Melee, selling over 13 million units worldwide. Most gamers were in love with the new characters and content.
That's mainly because the Wii sold. Oh yeah, here it is. Oh yeah, dude. Oh, here's my post. You can see what I was talking about earlier. I played Marth here. I just talked about this. I played Marth mostly. I didn't get to try the other characters because I was just playing with it at a friend's house. But the thing is, I only played the characters once or twice. Like, I only had a few hours to work with. So this is nothing more than, like, a first impression. And that is my first impression. There's no dash dancing, tripping's random, but what I didn't know was that tripping was only a 1% chance. I was only going based off of my experiences. And I still think Marth is so boring. I still think Marth is so boring. Yeah, that was my post. But you gotta remember, this is before the game came out. There was I played it at a friend's house in Philly where they had like a Japan version of the game before its official release, and I got to play it for just a few hours. So I tried every character like once or twice. And I really disliked the new Marth. But then once the game came out and I started playing it in my room every single day, all night, then went to tourneys all the time, I really just grinded the game all day, every day, nonstop. Then I was like, oh, okay. Nah, it's actually good. Just pick Mend Knight, not Marth. And then if you pick Mend Knight, you're basically playing Melee. And that's fun.
As for all
but he's the only fun character. He's the only fun character. I think honestly, if Mend Knight wasn't in the game as such a fun character, I would have just picked another character that was similar to Melee. Like, I was maining DDD. My DDD and Falco were my other best because I just chain grab. But I think I would have gotten bored with the game after about a year. But with Mend Knight, there's a lot of... What I like about it is that there's a lot of skill expression. Like, you know how in a game like Checkers, there's not much skill expression, but in a game like Chess, with its complexities, there's a lot of skill expression? Or if you play Ultimate Online without the mod Switch, with like a heavyweight, you have to do your input so early, because of the buffer system and input delay, that you can't really show how good or bad you are, because it's really easy to get up to a certain point, but you can't go beyond that point because there's no reaction time of the engine. You know, that's what I would call a skill expression. What I liked about Brawl is it still had a lot of skill expression, just not as much as Melee.
The most fundamental aspect of Melee that made it so much fun: the core gameplay mechanics.
No! Ooh! You see, Brawl is for noobs. It takes no skill. No skill.
That's actually not true.
You can't win dash or L cancel.
Smash on the Wii had been intended.
It takes a lot of skill. It's just a lot different.
Slower.
This is the only time this happened to me in my life. But I tripped. I literally lost the set to Nakat because I was doing a run-up early down air, and I tripped at the same moment as he pressed grab. I didn't even do anything wrong except press dash. Look, I literally lost a set because I tripped in a grab at 0, and then whoever gets the lead times each other out. Because the lead in that game is OP. Honestly, the lead in Ultimate is also OP.
Tripping mechanic had been added,
Look.
where dashing could randomly cause a player to become completely vulnerable.
I was literally doing the input for run-up dare, and I literally lost this set for no reason. I lost this set for no fucking reason. But if we're gonna talk statistically, the actual truth is, even though tripping is really, like, it's a toxic trait in general, it only happens about 1% of dashes, which means it rarely affects the outcome of the game. That was one of the only games I've ever lost in my life to tripping. I've rarely won a game to tripping, and I've rarely lost a game to tripping. I lost one match to Ally. Actually, at Clash of Titans 4, which was one of the biggest majors of the 2009, I think 2008, 2009, I beat Ally in Grand Finals 6-1. I almost 6-0'd him. The game I lost is because I tripped and he up-tilted me. Otherwise, I probably would have had a 6-0. It was like a last hit game and I tripped and got up-tilted. But even though these examples do happen, it's very rare statistically. Like, Rage mechanic in Smash 4 is a lot worse than tripping because it affects almost every single game. Tripping sounds a lot worse on paper, and it's awful when it does happen. But the mathematical frequency of when it will change the outcome of the match is all extremely rare compared to Smash 4 Rage, which is way worse for that reason.
I haven't seen tripping.
It's ridiculous. People are calling it the worst thing that they've ever added to any fighting game. It could cost you the match, pretty much. So I'm just imagining like a $10,000 tournament where the guy trips at the last second and he dies.
So as he's running, he could
It's
be
possible
really tripped.
Whoever thought of tripping and then should have been fired. And then they had to have gone through a bunch of other people to approve it. They all should have been fired too.
The result of all these changes was that the fast and aggressive playstyle of Melee was heavily disincentivized. Instead, more patient and defensive playstyles would be rewarded due to the game's reduced tempo.
I actually don't agree with this. I do agree that with certain characters you have to do that, but I actually think Mend Knight is a good balance. Mend Knight is very similar to me to a Melee Marth Fox. He's like a Melee Marth Fox hybrid, where we're putting pressure on them into the frame traps could be effective. I think it was super matchup based though. Like in some matchups you do want to play the timer, and in other matchups you want to play aggressive. For example, let me show you an example of an aggressive set. I'll show you. The best way to fight Olimar in that game is to play it aggressive. You know how Niantono is considered the best Olimar in the world? I had to fight Niantono here. Let's watch how I played against him. This is the best Olimar player in the world, who also got 2nd place at Apex 2012. I got to fight him in bracket in Japan, and let's watch this set real quick so you can see how I played. I'd say this is around my prime. You don't want to give Olimar time to get his good Pikmin. You have to keep pressure on him. It's very different than Ice Climbers. I tried camping Olimar, and what happens is they just get a bunch of OP Pikmin. You can't really time out, it doesn't work as well. You have to put pressure on the whole time. So see how I'm always approaching? And then I break the Pikmin. Oh yeah, this mechanic, gliding. This is a very skill-based mechanic. Based on your controller and the exact angle you hold the stick, which is extremely different on every controller, by the way, the glide might be precise or not. If you do a super perfect glide into a perfect landing attack, you can actually attack before they can. However, if you're not skillful with the glide, you can't do that. So this is one of the elements of skill in the game. And in other sets, you'll see the glide used a lot. You could see it in the grand finals of me versus Ally. But it's one of those things where you force aggression on them. But if you're not very, very used to your controller and you don't know how to angle it exactly perfectly, you're going to do a bad glide and it won't be a good tactic. I fake him out to make him want to air dodge. I use my position movement to manipulate his movement. Because I threaten a possibility. What I'm doing is actually the optimal way to fight him. So a lot of people, when they say it's aggressive, the thing you gotta understand is it's matchup based. Some matchups are timeout matchups, whereas other matchups are like this. Fox is good. Yeah, Fox actually has like a even matchup, or almost even or almost even against Meta Knight. But he gets chain grabbed badly by certain characters, which makes his matchup spread not as good because of the chain grabbing with certain characters. I'm using multi-hits to do damage for the armor. Look how I set up the threat. Look at the way I push advanced state. I use the tip of my hitboxes in a way that frame traps, and in case he whistles, I get good damage. So even if he lives, I get my damage. I set my moves up early to set up optimal frame trapping. This is stuff that Zane was not even doing to Rat Monster until I taught Zane how to juggle. So I'm already doing better juggling with Meta Knight and Marth than Zane did a few months ago, before I taught him about how using full hop against Luigi is good for the juggle. I had nobody teach me. I'm not trolling, I swear to God. You can literally look at my videos and see proof of this. I made 3 video guides on this. And you can see Zane's most recent video, he finally did it. I had to kill at 190. And you see here, keep the pressure on. This stage is fun. You notice how it's going to be a lot of keeping the pressure on. The reason you have to play like this is because you don't want Almar to get a bunch of purple Pikmin. If you give a lot of time for Almar to camp, he gets like two purple Pikmin, and then he's unbeatable. 2 purple Pikmin Almar is by far the best character. It's like Steve with max materials. Well, maybe not that good, but maybe. He's still top 1 when he has... He's top 1 character when he has purples. So what the goal is to stop him from getting them. The white ones are OP too, because if they throw that white one at you, and you don't use a move to get it off you, it does a lot of damage. It does like 5-6 damage per hit, and it does a bunch of hits per one. The next match I'm going to show you right after this is going to be crazy. See what I'm saying? If you do everything just right, you could barely get these things out. Okay, so let me show you I'm going to show you one match where I feel like might be the best match I've ever played. This match is Optimal Brawl. So watch this match.
Easily gets it done. He is going right into it. I might have to eat my words.
You're going for frame traps. It's just frame traps. Combos, edge guards.
There's still room for a comeback. Very unlikely comeback.
And then I do what I call it a super zoning, where you do the double jump. You get up to threaten so that they won't attack you. But then you do double jump in place to start your momentum. You see my melee Marth does the same thing as my Brawl Meta Knight. See that? I do the double jump to stop momentum immediately. To get the I get the optimal threat ASAP by running at him. Then I use the double jump to stop all momentum. This is something that works in every Smash game. Look, watch closely. I bait out his forward air to do this. There's a lot that goes into my decisions. A lot. If you look, and I do it in place.
And the difference is right here. When Lee played through, Lee tried to camp him. Music King is right in his face. No fear.
He fell out of the very end. Otherwise, that would have been game. That would have been game in 50 seconds.
This is unbelievable.
I tripped and lost momentum. Never mind, I didn't lose momentum.
And he is about to lose in under 2 minutes.
I didn't think he'd make it on stage. Here I'm just trying to end it because it's over. You know, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm just trying to end it. Let's get over it with. Look how I set up my juggle. Look, see how I set up the double jump? I do it for a threat, but then I do up air fast fall. That way, in case he air dodge, I could do a double jump down air or a double jump nair. So this is how Brawl is a lot of the time. A lot of matchups are like this. Ice Climbers are not one of those matchups. Ice Climbers, you get the lead timeout. And that's why when it comes to Meta Knight versus Ices, or literally anybody versus Ices, It's unfortunate. I didn't get to go to this tournament. I never got to go to EVO 2008 with the one that had items because I didn't have the money to afford the plane ticket.
Ken would make it all the way to Grand Finals, where he would face off against CPU, a 15-year-old who had never competed in a Smash tournament before. CPU entered EVO only because the date just happened to coincide with his family's vacation to Las Vegas. In their set, CPU would absolutely destroy the Smash legend, and although the tournament's controversial rule set definitely played a part in that, what really made the difference...
I really think it just had to do if nobody good was there, and nobody knew how to play.
His strategy was to bounce around between each side of the stage and spam projectiles. Ken's melee Marth would have been able to quickly dismantle this strategy, but without access to the movement and combo mechanics that defined his signature style, Ken wasn't able to come up with counterplay and would be defeated in a best-of-3 set. Watching Melee's greatest player fall to a random kid off the street was all the proof hardcore gamers needed to confirm their doubts. And next year,
I really feel like there's a lot of agendas. When people have Melee docs, I feel like they don't give Brawl the credit. Brawl is extremely skill based. It's just that they have an agenda of comparing it to Melee. Like if this was Smash 4 Ultimate, they would have said the exact same thing about Smash 4 Ultimate, because all the games after Melee did the exact same thing where they don't have... none of the games, except Project M, have the same thing. It's just all of Brawl is victim to this agenda. And because it's a brand new game, nobody knows how to play the game. Like, this is right when the game came out. Nobody knew how to play. I think if I was able to attend that tourney, I would have won it easily. I think I would have won that tournament very easily. But I didn't have money to buy a $450 plane ticket to go to Vegas.
Nintendo's strategy of prioritizing internal development had long frustrated third-party developers who felt that their needs were being consistently ignored. However, Nintendo's strategy would culminate into one final burnt bridge that would haunt them forever.
Yeah, it was $99 at one point.
Nintendo and consumer electronics company Sony announced a collaboration project to build a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo. The partnership fell apart when Nintendo brought in Sony's competitor Philips into the arrangement.
I don't even know what Philips is.
A licensing dispute that ended with Nintendo siding with Philips and cutting out Sony entirely. Having been sidelined, Sony felt humiliated. The leadership would congregate, and after some discussion, they would decide to continue developing their own CD-ROM based console. On that day, a new division of the company was formed, Sony Computer Entertainment. Sony themselves had no experience in game development, and out the gate, they knew that they would never be able to compete with Nintendo's stronghold of IPs. But perhaps they didn't need to. Recognizing that third-party developers were becoming more and more unhappy with Nintendo's lack of support towards them, Sony devised a plan. Their new console was made to be as friendly as possible to outside developers, much cheaper and easier to develop for than the upcoming Nintendo 64. Third parties were enticed and would gear their biggest projects towards the new market player. When the 5th generation of consoles came around, would gear developers
games just don't look any better than this.
Nintendo 64. Third parties were enticed and would gear their biggest projects towards the new market player. When the
games just don't look any better than this. It's really funny, like 20 years later. It was actually insane for a time. Like, jokes aside, it was insane for the time.
The 5th generation of consoles came around, it was time for Sony to showcase their hand. The PlayStation, a brand new competitor to the Nintendo 64. With a slew of incredibly popular titles from third-party developers, Sony didn't just challenge Nintendo, they outright defeated them. The PlayStation moved over 100 million units worldwide. The Nintendo 64 sold 33 million. Sony had won the 5th generation decisively, and Nintendo's era of dominance was beginning to collapse. To rub salt in the wound, Nintendo and Philips add-on would never come to fruition. The end result of the partnerships would be the Philips CDI, which is known to host some of the worst games to ever feature Nintendo-branded characters. Nintendo.
Oh, chat! We need to play this game. We need to play this game. I don't know how. I need to find a way to play this, stream this game. It'd be so funny.
The end results of the partnerships would be the Philips CDI.
It would be so funny if I streamed this game. I think it'd be hilarious. It'd be insane content. Somebody give me the way to... Somebody give me the way I could stream this. I think it'd be so funny.
Which is known to host some of the worst games to ever feature Nintendo-branded characters. As the 6th generation of consoles began approaching, Sony would announce their next console, the PlayStation 2. And in a surprise twist, a new competitor would make a grand entrance into the stage of gaming. American software company Microsoft saw the unveiling of the PlayStation 2 as a major threat to home computers, the main platform of their operating system Windows. Acting quickly, Microsoft would rush into the market with a home console of their own, the Xbox. With two large corporate competitors at the doorstep, Nintendo needed a plan to avoid another repeat of the 5th generation. With third parties still hesitant to develop for them, their strategy was to double down on their own hardware and IPs. From a technical perspective, the GameCube would have stronger graphics capabilities than the PlayStation 2. The library of the GameCube would also go on to contain some of the most creative and
Dude, the
compatible hardware and
GameCube,
IPs.
I think the GameCube was the best system of all time. But you know what's sad? It sold terribly. From a business perspective, it was a failure from Nintendo's point of view based on sales. But from my perspective as a hardcore gamer, it had all of the best games of all time. Melee, the best video game of all time. Metroid Prime, by far the best, like insane, arguably the best FPS, at least like best Metroid, best FPS type Super Metroid. F-Zero GX and Double Dash, the best and second best racing game of all time. Fire Emblem, Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn, arguably the best Fire Emblems. Like, they had, like, everything. Like, and even when it wasn't the best of something, like, Wind Waker was still really good. Like, there's a lot of games. Like, I think it was just the best system of all time. Unfortunately, it didn't sell well. And so Nintendo had to change strategy. But I think it was unlucky. It's because they were competing with, like, the PS2, which was, like, the only thing that was as successful as, like, the Switch. It's unfortunate.
Any future Smash titles he works on will probably never be like Melee.
I actually hate this because, like, you could literally, if you just want to be casual, you could just play with items. Like Melee covers both. Where you could literally make it as casual as you want or as competitive as you want. It actually covers both options. So I don't think you need to make a sacrifice. I think it already had both.
The message was loud and clear to the community. Despite everything they had poured into the game, Sakurai just didn't see the value in Melee the same way the fans did. Where they saw a masterpiece, Sakurai saw a flawed creation. And with Brawl becoming the highest selling Smash and fighting game up to that point, it seemed as though the Smash community were the only ones in disagreement with Sakurai's decision. Most player bases would throw in the towel here. Melee was never going to get a true sequel, so why invest yourself into a competitive game when the developer themselves have moved past it? But maybe the Melee community didn't need a sequel. After all, the game already existed, and Melee players had already proved that they could build a scene on their own.
Oh, dude, this is the crew battle of me versus Mango. Dude, this match, this is East Coast versus West Coast crew battle. And I think Genesis 2009 or 2011. I don't remember which. Let me show you something. Not many people know about this match. I started the match, bro. I started the match with 3 stocks. Mango didn't want me to go Marth or Sheik. So he purposely went Corneria to force me onto Fox. And I had to beat his 4 stocks with my 3 for our crew battle to win. This is what Melee was back then. And so right here, I know he's gonna DI to the higher part of the stage. So I know the chain grab's not gonna work soon. So I know that I could get this up smash. And that way, if he doesn't DI away, I get a follow-up. No matter what, I get 18 damage, but if he doesn't DI away, I get a follow-up. And then I did this bear, but auto-canceled it, and did this up smash, because in case he side beat, I would either hit the early part, or the late part, or I would hop over the side B. In all 3 possible outcomes, this up smash would kill that side B. There's a lot that goes into my decisions that I don't think people realize.
Brawl was broadly popular during its launch, and since Melee had already...
Brawl, it's even more than this guy's saying. Brawl was bigger than Melee up until the second half of 2013, which is where I made my Melee comeback. Brawl was literally bigger than Melee for 5 years. 5 years straight where Brawl was bigger than Melee. Apex 2013, for example, which is actually the same tourney I double eliminated Mango. I got second in Brawl, and Brawl was literally the bigger game. So there was all the reason to play Brawl, but also not like, I'm not going to stop Melee, but I put all my time into Brawl, mostly, because that was clearly the bigger game, and it was clearly the future. Nobody ever thought Melee would be revived in 2013 onward. That was unexpected to everybody.
The prospects for Brawl having a proper esports scene were promising. However, there were those who felt that the GameCube's iteration of Smash was the superior game that they wanted to continue playing. In 2009, prominent Melee player and tournament organizer Alucard would host Revival of Melee, the first large Melee tournament to be held post-Brawl. The tournament would attract a combination of some of Melee's greatest champions.
Oh yeah, so on this tournament, I realized Melee. So here's the story about Revival of Melee, chat. You know how obviously Brawl is bigger than Melee the whole 2008, and I had a really good 2008. I was the best player at 08. But there's actually a website that shows the stats. There's actually a website here. If you go to Melee tennis rankings, you can see how good everyone's score is based on nothing but results, like pure results, no bias. So if you could look through any year. So if we go to like, you can see my score for 07. I have like 3,000, and the others have 2,200 and under. And you can see 08. This is based on only tournament results. No bias, just tourney results. And here's my elo for the year at 3,200. It was basically just the mean Mango show, though. It was just the Music King Mango show, basically. What was happening was Brawl was bigger than Melee by far in 08, of course. It was bigger than Melee by far for 5 years. The whole next 5 years, it was bigger than Melee. This didn't change until 2013 plus. Alucard, the TO for Revival of Melee, messaged me, and he wanted me to go to Revival of Melee. And I knew that there was no point to play the game because it was gonna die. So I, like, barely touched the game. Like, I was only playing the game at tourneys mostly. Because, like, I'll still play it. Like, I'll still play front people and stuff, but, like, I was really, you know, Brawl focused, right? But I didn't want the game to die, so I told him that if he gets Mango to go, then I will also go. Now, Mango that whole year was only playing Melee, and I was doing both. So I was not quite in my best form, but I still ended up getting second place, even being a, like, which is still honestly better than I didn't even think I would do that, but I mean, I did ended up getting second place at this tournament. But the most important thing about this tournament is that the losers finals was me versus Shiz, and this match revived the game. If I didn't go to this tourney, tell Alucard that I wasn't gonna go if Mango didn't go, and then have this match against Shizwiz, this guy, the Melee would have died. This has 1 million views, and most of these views happened a long time ago, which means at the time, this is what revived the game. I actually 3-stock Shiz with Sheik earlier, including on this same stage. I just didn't want him to take my Sheik to, like, Pokemon or FDs, Fox or whatever, so I stayed Marth because Marth can handle more situations against Spaceys, where Sheik kind of can't do Pokemon FD as well. So I went Marth, even though I 3-stocked him on the same stage. In an earlier match, we did Sheik versus Falco and Yoshi's, and I 3-stocked him. But I wanted to consider, like, counterpick stuff, and I didn't want to, like... So I was like, I'm just going to stay Marth because I don't want him to, like, do a heavy counterpick, right? So I beat him Marth Fox on FD, and I didn't want him to go, like, Pokemon versus my Sheik or whatever. So I stayed Marth to cover more options. And this is that match. This match revived Melee. Melee would have died right here. It would have never grown. It would have stayed small. It would have been like a Smash 64 community. Maybe bigger in 64, but it wouldn't have. It would have been like half the thing. This is where all the eyes saw it on YouTube. There's one thing that's very difficult about going from Melee to Brawl. The shield stun. When you go from Melee to Brawl, Falco forces you to play the Melee game of playing out of shield. But in Brawl, there's a small, it's not heavy amount, but there's a few frames of buffering. So if you're going to do like an optimal narrative shield in Brawl, you're actually going to do it a little early for the buffer. Because there's buffering in the game, but it's not heavy. Like, you know how Ultimate has a lot of buffer and a lot of input delay? Where Brawl is kind of like the halfway point between Melee and Ultimate, where there's a little bit of buffer and a little bit of input delay. But it's still enough to mess up your habits. So there's a lot of time I just get hit and I just freeze and shield, because Falco really tests that part of the game more. In the matchups that aren't Falco, if you're fighting a character that's not Falco, you're not forced to play, like, the out of shield part of the game is not as major of a role. Like, you can get away with spacing and other stuff, but with Falco, it forces you to play that part of the game. This also made it pretty difficult to fight Falco if you're not YOLOing Melee. It's a lot worse now, though. Going from Ultra to Melee is even more difficult. Oh yeah, by the way, vanilla Melee means no shield dropping and inconsistent dashback. Just so we're aware, pretty much anything you can do now, it's less consistent because of vanilla melee. But this combo he did was sick. Look at what Shiz does here.
No, this is ridiculous.
I've never seen this. I've never seen that before. I think I meant to short hop. I think I meant to short hop up air, but I was really like right here. I would short hop up air, but I'm nervous, so I full hop. Like I could literally just up smash. I could literally just up smash right now and he dies. But with that many people freaking yelling as I'm playing, I'm freaking shaking. Me versus Shiz also, we also played it fast. Fast 1, another Florida major. And this match got 1 million views on YouTube. And then everyone saw it, and this brought tons of hype into the game, and it also brought a ton of new players into the game. Also, just so you know, these chain grab percents, I had to know every exact percent. So, like, this is like I had to know that this would barely work. Like, otherwise you miss. Because, like, if it's, just, for example, right there, that up tilt, if you're at a slightly lower percent, it'll hit sideways and I won't get this combo. I had to know all the tiny percents. Like, if you DI behind, did you know that if Falco DIs behind Marth, the chain grab lasts significantly longer? I bet you don't know. Most people don't know that. The chain grab lasts way longer if you DI behind Falco on turnaround grab. But you have to either walk forward grab or dash grab forward, like under 20%. I don't remember the exact number off memory right now. A little rusty right now. But at this time, I knew the numbers really well. And so I was looking at the numbers on every up throw. And that if I didn't know the numbers on every up throw, that wouldn't work. Like if he DI'd to the right twice instead of back the second time, I would have had to do a walk grab or a dash JC grab. Or a dash grab. These are things that people don't see. People who don't know the game, they'll just be like looking at that, oh my god, that's so lame. And they don't understand that at every moment I'm calculating all the possibilities. This means that there's possibilities that did not happen, that could have happened, that I was also accounting for. I think people don't understand that part. I'm accounting for possibilities that didn't happen, but could have happened. And then right here, for some reason, I just had a feeling he was gonna down smash. And I know that if I get the shield DI in, I'm either gonna survive the down smash, barely, because I'm doing like inward DI, but I won't get pushed off the level. I can still get the grab range because I'm doing shield DI in. And then what I do here is I dash off fair. However, I considered the possibility that he might do a double jump down air to spike me and kill me first. So as I was doing the input for the runoff fair, I was also inputting the input for the R button to tech. That way, if we trade, I will still wall tech the wall. And then I will still kill him. I kind of wish that he did the dare, just so I could have shown that off. Because what would have happened is I probably would have traded the fair and the dare at the same time. Most likely. And then I would have wall-teched and then still killed him. Most people don't know all this. That was, in my book, which I haven't released, but unfortunately, but I will eventually. I already wrote pages of, like a full page on analysis of this match. I wrote it like 5 years ago. So yeah, so if this didn't happen, the game was just dead.
Through this experience, many decided to continue playing Melee and fostering the scene around it. But the scene was now much smaller, with only the game's biggest enthusiasts choosing to continue playing Melee well past its intended lifespan. The GameCube was now considered deprecated hardware, and Melee was off of most store shelves. As such, the game was much less accessible to a broader audience. Local tournaments became sparse, and the scene would largely go underground, returning to its scrappy identity from its earliest years. On the other side, a proper scene around Brawl was budding. There was a notable chunk of players who felt that the Wii game did have competitive merit, or at the very least, preferred to stay within the newest iteration of the franchise, and with Melee veterans either choosing to retire or continue playing the GameCube title, Brawl's player base was mainly composed of new figures. This new collection of players would get an opportunity for esports in 2010, as MLG would officially add Brawl to the competitive circuit and host 5 major tournaments across the country. But unlike its predecessor, Brawl's transition into esports wouldn't be as smooth. For the first time in the series' history, Nintendo would choose to get involved. On April 15th of 2010, MLG co-founder Sundance Giovanni would announce that despite their best efforts, the team was unable to obtain official streaming rights from Nintendo. Nintendo had begun building a reputation for going after outlets using their intellectual property in videos and live streams, and although a small grassroots tournament could usually get away with streaming their events unnoticed, a large-scale operation like MLG just couldn't take the risk. Viewership would be limited to attendees of the event, and without a proper channel to showcase.
And this, what they're saying now, a lot of my best moments in both Melee and Brawl, a lot of my best moments where I'm literally just destroying the field and doing a bunch of crazy stuff, it wasn't recorded. I don't have proof of half of my career. So when people, it's unfortunate because a lot of those moments were a lot of my best moments in Melee and Brawl, especially relative to the field. But there's just no footage. Like 99% of it wasn't recorded.
Brawl scene, much of the spectacle.
I mean, a lot of it was,
received,
but
just not
it's not like
After just
everything
1
now.
year of
Nowadays, if
competition,
anyone
Brawl
does
would
anything,
drop
you
from
know
the
about it.
MLG circuit in 2011, and the newly established community now found itself in the same position as Melee, relying on the grassroots scene to stay alive. This period is now referred to as the dark age of competitive Smash. Both Melee and Brawl were well past their typical hype cycles, and with no major esports organization willing to invest in either, the competitive scene was considered deeply niche. The players who remained did so purely out of love for the games, competing without much outside recognition, with little guarantee the scene had any future at all. Now far from the spotlight, it was entirely up to the communities to sustain themselves, and despite having little overlap in their actual player bases, the Melee and Brawl scenes chose to largely stick together, sharing tournament infrastructure, production resources, and broadcast platforms. Genesis and Apex, two of the premier tournament series to emerge from this era, ran Melee and Brawl events simultaneously under the same roof, and in 2009, brothers Gimmer and Apostle founded BG Bootcamp, a production company dedicated to live streaming and broadcast coverage for both games. Other groups like Clash Tournaments would follow suit. Smash was no longer thriving, but it was doing enough to stay alive, and sometimes, surviving long enough to see the right moment is all it takes. In January of 2013, the Evolution Championship Series announced the lineup for their newest installment. Since Smash's initial appearance at EVO, the event had grown considerably. The resurgence of titles like Street Fighter IV and the explosion of live streaming had pushed the tournament into genuine mainstream visibility. It was now one of the most watched gaming events in the world, but this year's announcement came with an unusual twist. Rather than pre-selecting their full lineup, the organizers declared that one slot would be determined by a charity drive benefiting the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. Whichever gaming community raised the most money would earn their game a spot on the EVO stage.
So, chat, remember when I said I revived Melee, like, intentionally and unintentionally, like with that match of Shiz? Okay, I revived it a second time. I'll give you a little bit spoilers. We ended up beating Skullgirls by about $17,000. My friend Nova, who I begged constantly every few days, and he was a millionaire at the time in Australia. His name was Nova. That's why I used the Nova tag in 2014 in a lot of sets, and 2013 in a lot of sets. I convinced him to donate $20,700 or $20,800. I also donated $200 myself and spent 2 weeks non-stop messaging everybody on Facebook, reaching out to everywhere, like on Twitter, Smashboards, mass messaging everybody in addition to that. If I did not do what I did, we would have 100% lost to Skullgirls. Because my sniper, nobody knew about him except me and him. He was a final sniper in the last 5 to 10 minutes that nobody knew about. They had snipers too, but nobody had a sniper like my sniper. We would have had no EVO 2013 with 99% certainty. Like 99.9% certainty, no EVO 2013. And we have no idea what would have happened in the following year. Like, we may or may not have had that opportunity again the next year. It's impossible to know. But EVO 2013 would not have happened. And that ended up reviving the game again. So I basically saved Melee twice. In 07 and then in 2013. But for some reason, people don't talk about this. Like, I've literally carried Melee so hard. I think I carried Melee harder than Mango. Because Mango might have the biggest fan base. But that match of Shiz and literally me getting EVO 2013 literally revived it. Even if you downplay me, I'm at least top 2 with Mango. for saving the game.
The final competition would come down to a battle between Melee and popular indie fighting game Skullgirls. Prominent figures of the scenes would come together to drive awareness and help raise funds to get Melee on the main stage. Prominent figures of the scenes would come
Right here? I think some people learned about it. Okay, I think they're talking about it in this chat. Look. I think some people are talking about it.
It all culminated in the Spirit Bomb, a final fundraising push put together by the Melee It On Me podcast and hosted on the VG Bootcamp Twitch channel. With only 6 hours before the deadline, the stream was meant as a celebration of Melee to inspire fans and gather as many donations.
So what he did is, like, a few hours before it, he donated 10,000. It was like 10.7 or 10.8k, and then he dropped another 10k in the last, like, 5 minutes. I think it was like 5 minutes before it ended, he dropped another 5k. And he told me, I remember him messaging me, saying that he thinks he broke the system, lol. He said he broke the website, look.
By the end of the night, Smash community had donated nearly $95,000 to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation and earned themselves a spot on the EVO main stage. What the community achieved was remarkable.
See? So what? Oh wait, so we won by 16,000. Even more than I thought. We won by about $16,000.
Nintendo would also emerge to say otherwise. On July,
I want to be clear that I'm not saying I'm the only person that made this happen. I'm just saying that if I didn't do what I did, we would have lost.
Before the tournament began, EVO co-founder Tom Cannon announced that Super Smash Bros. Melee would have
I am
to be
autistic,
removed
yes,
from the
Zippius.
event's broadcast
I'm, like,
schedule.
very well known for
Nintendo
that.
of America had informed the organizers that they did not have permission to stream the game. According to the organizers, Nintendo had threatened to shut down the event altogether, and left with no choice but to negotiate, EVO had reached a compromise. Melee would remain on the schedule, but would not be broadcast.
We've taken a game that a lot of people question how competitive we are. And I think the fact that we're all here rounding up now, fighting for something that we put so much hard work and effort shows just how much heart and how much competition we have. We're ready to go. The tournament's still going to happen. If we have to take it back to the old school where everything's on YouTube, so be it. I don't mind uploading. It's been a while. All that being said, we're not going down without a fight. No Johns. No Johns whatsoever.
Fans were immediately outraged. The community had raised nearly $95,000 for a great cause, and without any involvement from Nintendo, just for the chance to be seen playing their favorite video game. And now, that same company was blocking them from sharing the moment with the world. Within hours, the story was the #1 topic on Reddit, and the hashtag #FreeMelee was trending on Twitter. Major gaming publications were pushing the story, and online commentators across gaming voiced their outrage.
Nintendo has taken it away from the fans, literally saying that EVO can hold the tournament, but you can't actually host the games. This is freaking ridiculous. They can't stream now. Like, I don't even understand, like, how the hell does a giant corporation get its head so far up its freaking ass that they can't even think of the people that put up so much money for them to actually get what they want?
Look at that dog.
Thanks, Nintendo.
Nintendo had landed themselves in a PR nightmare. Faced with mounting public pressure, they folded, walking back their decision and allowing the broadcast to continue as planned. The Melee community was back on prime time, and after watching their own creator try to take that moment away from them, they had something to prove. This wasn't just going to be a gaming tournament, it was going to be a direct act of defiance.
Oh, he read that roll! He read that roll!
EVO 2013 is considered one of the most intense Melee tournaments in the game's history. Fan favorite player Mango would make an incredible run through the losers bracket, defeating opponent after opponent in high stakes sets until taking the entire tournament. When it was all over, Melee had drawn peak live viewership of over 130,000, setting the record for both EVO and fighting game broadcasts up to that point. Gamers from around the world had tuned in and found themselves unexpectedly captivated. Melee had it all: the technical depth, intense competition, and the
oh yeah. So I actually got destroyed by HBox at this tourney. So here's the thing. I was 4-stocking all the other puffs. Like, really bad. Like, 4-stocking at low damage, the other puffs. Then when I fight HBox, the stuff I'm doing suddenly isn't working. And I felt like, okay, I feel like skill-wise, I have all the skill. So it must be something else. That's what I was thinking. So what I did, after EVO 2013, I went and VOD reviewed my sets with HBox. I reviewed all his sets with me, Mango, and other players to see, okay, what am I doing wrong? And I realized, I'm not going to say what those things are, because I'm his coach right now, and I don't want to... I don't want to put him at disadvantage. But there was basically a few key things I changed that he was taking advantage of in my habits. I removed those things. I rematched him at a tournament called the Big House 3. And I fought him. I beat him 3-1 and 3-0 with a 6-1 total score to win that major tournament. And that was just from studying. I went from getting 3 stocked and 2-0'd to almost 6-0ing him just from VOD reviewing. I also trained the player known as Prince Abu. Me and him talked online a lot, and I would teach him everything I knew, everything HBox was doing. I spent a whole week training Abu because I thought that if I had a proper training partner, I would be able to get proper habits. That was my strategy, to study, but also train and apprentice Prince Abu. So I taught him everything. And then at Big House 3, I played Prince Abu, forcing him to do the same stuff HBox did so that I could get the proper practice. It worked. And then I beat him over and over and over for the next few months.
Their PR stunt had unintentionally raised awareness for the competitive scene, and this growing awareness would only funnel into an expanding player base, with Melee's most influential media piece following shortly after. Filmmaker Travis Buchamp, known online as Samox, had first encountered the competitive Melee community during its dark age. Fascinated by the technical depth of a game he had grown up playing and the passionate players keeping it alive, he began working on a documentary chronicling the scene's history and personalities. Filming started in 2011. 2 years later, just months after EVO, the Smash Brothers documentary would be released.
I was also one of the episodes in this. One of the more popular episodes.
History from its golden age all the way to the EVO 2013 championships, and would quickly become a viral sensation. Not only was the high production value very unique for a YouTube fan film, but the timing of the documentary couldn't have been more perfect. People who had played Melee as kids were now growing into young adults, and seeing the game they were nostalgic for reframed as a deep competitive art form.
Oh, that's me.
And seeing the game they were nostalgic for reframed as
I could have actually just went for a fair here, but I was trying to be cool because it was EVO.
The deep competitive art form. The players themselves were also able to showcase their various personalities, rivalries, and passions, and viewers found themselves resonating with the various subjects of the film and the trials and tribulations of the Smash community.
Well, I actually want to show you something I did just because it was EVO. Because it was at EVO, this is EVO 2014, and because it was EVO and I wanted to show off how cool the game would be, I want you to see what I did.
Call that the ops attack. Oh, nice. Tries to go for the shine out of shield after Music trying to apply some pressure. Good tech chase. Here we go. Puts him in disguise. Ooh, Mewtwo King. Hey! Style!
I did not have to do all that. But because it was EVO, I wanted to show off how cool the game would be. Because I know if people see that, they're going to be like, wow, this game's sick. So what I did here is I knew PPMD at this time. He had a habit of dashing away.
Some people tend to call that the ops attack.
Like right here.
Oh, nice.
I knew he liked to dash dance, so I would go for a wave dash at a shield and hard read it. And I knew he would always tech roll in as a habit. So those are 2 habits in a row. I went for a hard read. And then I knew he'd hold in.
Ooh, Mewtwo King. Hey! Style! And PPMD smiles like, yeah.
I didn't win this set, but I wanted to make the game more cool.
The Smash Brothers may have been made as a
Oh, that's me! That's me when I'm like a teenager. I was like 18. I think I was 19 years old. 18. I think I was like 18 years old in this picture.
This was the beginning of what is now known as the Platinum Age of Smash.
I've literally never heard this term Platinum Age of Smash. Have you seen me in my prime? I'm weak right now because I haven't worked out in 3 years. This was me 4 years ago. But I'm not like that anymore. But I'm gonna try to get back to this. If you want to see me right now, I haven't worked out in 3 years. So this is what I look like now with no working out in 3 years. As you can see, I've lost almost all of my muscles. However, I think I can get it back if I just work at it. Like, I think my genetics are fine. I just have to actually, like I haven't been to a gym in 3 years. But I could bring it back to this. I think I can do it. Oh, chat, actually, this reminds me of something. You want to see my first tournament? The Puffster just uploaded this video. Here, the Puffster found this old footage. He was at the same turn as me. That's the Puffster when he's younger. I don't remember. I don't know if that's me in the back, or I don't know if that's me or someone. But I'm in this venue. This is the first turn, 2005. This is 40 minutes, so we're not going to watch all of it, obviously.
Nintendo hosted the Super Smash Bros. For Wii U Invitational at the Nokia Theater in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, a lot of people suspect that the reason they didn't want me, they invited random people to this event, but I was considered the best Smash player of all time. Like, I don't think you understand. Like, I was arguably top 1, top 2 at Melee, and Brawl, and Project M at the same time. And they did not invite me. And a lot of people think it's because I had EMP in my tag. There's no proof of this, but everyone, like, almost everyone I've talked to thinks it's the same reason. They didn't invite me because I had EMP in my tag. They didn't invite anyone from Empire Arcadia because they didn't want that to see that on stage. That's what we think. A lot of people were saying it was a scam, like Triforce's Empire Arcadia, which I was a part of. They're saying it was a scam, and unfortunately, they were correct. But in 2014, I didn't know that. I didn't put my foot down and realize it until Apex 2015. I could have just removed association, and I would have had a better life. EMP in my tag. They didn't invite anyone from Empire Arcadia because they didn't want that to see that on stage. That's what we think. A lot of people were saying it was a scam, like Triforce's Empire Arcadia, which I was a part of. They're saying it was a scam, and unfortunately, they were correct. But in 2014, I didn't know that. I didn't put my foot down and realize it until Apex 2015. It's so unfortunate. I could have just removed association, and I would have had a better life. You know what Triforce did to me? No, I'm not in contact with Triforce. You know what he did to me? 5.5 years, he gave me empty... It was like 5.5 or 6 years, he gave me empty promises from 2009 up until Apex 2014 or 2015 when I decided to stop. Yeah, I think it was Apex 2015 where I finally said enough's enough. He gave me fake false promises about payouts. I never got paid in 6 years. Or the amount he paid me was about the same that I loaned to him, so it canceled out. So I basically made net zero. And you know what else he did? He also stopped me from getting other sponsors by using my... I gave him permission with the email and stuff because I trusted him because I'm stupid. And he actually made it so like if we didn't pay him directly, like I wouldn't even get other sponsor opportunities. And I gave him all of my trophies. All of my trophies up to 2014 or 2015. He ended up losing the storage for it, so all of my lifetime trophies, the first 10 years of my career, are gone forever. I would have an insane, huge trophy collection, bigger than anybody else's collection, if he didn't do that. I would back here, this whole wall, the whole wall behind me would be filled with nothing but medals. You wouldn't even see the wall. That's how big it would be if he didn't do that. I gotta take advantage of my entire life because I'm naive and trusting.
Even Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils
like look Pew Pew You who plays Melee and hates the other Smash games. Like he was invited. Random girls were invited. Everyone was invited except me. And I was literally the best in the world at like multiple games. And I'm not trolling when I say that.
I gotta be honest with the community. I gotta be honest, right? I play all of the Nintendo games. I suck at Smash. but my opportunity is coming with Smash on 3DS. Because now I'm going to play it on the go. I'm going to be able to come back.
Can I just say that Smash 3DS is by a large margin the worst Smash game? I actually entered numerous turns in that game using Duck Hunt Dog, Sonic, Charizard, some other stuff. I ended up getting first and second at all the turns. I would get first or second every single tourney. One in Florida and a whole bunch in SoCal. But it was so boring and bad. There was like no skill expression because you had to use the shitty circle pad. It's the only Smash game that I would actually say is a bad game. And I don't care if you say, oh, Smash Run carries it. No, it's not good enough. Every Smash game is amazing. Except Smash 3DS, which is like 3 tiers lower than everything else. It's the same reason that I think Double Dash is way better than Mario Kart DS. Mario Kart DS and Double Dash are essentially the same game. It's basically snaking the video game in Mario Kart form. It's essentially the same thing. But the difference between holding a GameCube controller and a circle pad is like 1,000-time difference, dude.
Up next time and kick your ass.
He just talking shit. He didn't do nothing.
Later that summer at EVO 2014, Melee would once again be invited back onto the lineup. This time, rather than threaten the broadcast, Nintendo would instead give it its blessing. They would officially sign on as a sponsor of Evolution 2014, with Reggie even giving a direct message to the fans during the tournament's finals.
Before the action begins, I want to thank you all for continuing to support the Super Smash Bros. Series over all these years. I had a great time getting to meet some of you at E3 last month, and was so impressed by the level of dedication dedication, passion, and sportsmanship that was shown by the players that participated in the first ever Super Smash Bros. Invitational. You never know. I might show up to challenge you someday. And if we ever do get to go head-to-head, please, no Johns.
Smash for Wii U and 3DS would officially launch in the fall of 2014, and although Melee players continued to play the GameCube title, players from the Brawl community would immediately transition over. And with the announcement of the first major tournament featuring the new title, Apex 2015, the unprecedented would occur. Nintendo would sign on as a sponsor for a major tournament driven by the Smash community. By all measures, it seemed like Nintendo had turned a new leaf. While they used to ignore or be aversive to their competitive players, now it seemed as though they were fully embracing their fans. Perhaps this strained relationship was starting to show signs of healing, but something was missing from the Apex 2015 lineup, and its absence suggested that Nintendo's newfound openness had strict limits, and maybe, behind the scenes,
Project M!
they were quietly working to reshape the community on their own terms.
Bro, Project M is so fucking sick, bro. Wait, Project M came... Oh, wow, I didn't know Project M came after Brawl Minus. I thought Project M came first and then Brawl Minus and Plus. Oh, yeah, I guess I'm... Oh, wait, maybe it is that order. I do remember Brawl Minus. I just didn't remember that which one came first. But apparently, according to this... Because I actually competed at a Brawl Minus tourney. You know what they did? I don't remember which character I was playing. It might have been like King Dedede or something. I was playing some character in Brawl Minus. I was fighting Vans, and one of the people who like worked on it, they completely destroyed my character because I destroyed them. And then I just dropped the game after that. And then Project M became big and I played PM. Dude, I used to have matches on VG Bootcamp, like Project M Grand Finals, where it had literally 500,000 plus views. Like, literally 500,000 views. And there was numerous videos with me in it of that size in Project M. Gimmer got scared of Nintendo, and he took down all the videos. Because they were trying to get, like, he was trying to get on good terms with Nintendo. And Nintendo was, like, telling him to, like, take the stuff down. It was my Mewtwo, my Fox, like, all my characters.
See a thriving competitive scene of
Also, nobody knows this. I did lose to Zero and Armada, but I beat them in the run back. The most recent set I had it for Armada, even though Armada beat me 3-2 at Apex twice, I actually 3-0'd him at I 2-0'd him at CEO. And then I also 6-0'd Zero at a tournament that never got uploaded to YouTube. Dude, look at that. This is why I had insane viewership. Dude, this was such a big part of my life. Imagine that getting taken down from me, bro. No, it did get re-uploaded. So look, some of it still exists, but it doesn't have the YouTube algorithm or anything. Look, see this? Project M re-uploads. 3,000 views 10 years ago. You know what this had before VG Bootcamp took it down? It had 500,000 views. It was at least 400,000. It might have even been as high as 600,000. And now it had to get uploaded with less than 1% of the viewership. That was just one example. Like it's a bunch of the best sets, a bunch of my best sets. They just took it down. And it sucks. Because that's a huge part of my legacy. Like, imagine if everything Zane did wasn't recorded. Imagine everything you see Zane do. Pretty cool, right? Now, imagine if only 10% of that got recorded, and the other 90% you see no videos. So 90% of the cool stuff he does, you don't get to see his skill. You wouldn't think as highly of him, would you? Because you wouldn't see 90% of what he's doing.
The amount of attention this unofficial Smash game had garnered was unprecedented, and Nintendo was not happy about it. Nintendo has never been shy about their aggressive policy towards game modifications and fan works built on their intellectual property.
Actually, let me show you something. I don't know which wiki this is. There's 3 wikis. I don't remember which one's the better one because for some reason it's split between 3. No, it's just 4 different wikis. In one of these 3 wikis, you can actually see my result. Okay, look. You can actually see what I'm doing in all the games. I don't think this is the right one. Let me see. Yeah, I think this is the one. Okay. So I want you to look from the timeline after Evo. So I want to show you my improvement after Evo. Starting with Carolfest 4 up until Big House, all this. This is what I was doing the end of the year, and I also led it into a decent amount into the next year. I didn't even get a 3rd place. I got only 1st and 2nd in this entire timeline, and I attended more than anybody. That's why I think I was the best in the world during this time. Because I literally attended everything, and I was just winning. But it wasn't just this. That's the thing. It wasn't just Melee. I was also going there for Brawl. I don't think the Liquidpedia shows all the results. Yeah, for some reason, the Liquipedia is focused on Melee. So they're not actually showing all my Brawl results. I don't know why. That's unfortunate. For some weird reason, the Smash Liquipedia shows more of my Melee results. But it skips a lot of the tournaments as well. Whereas, it does have more tournaments for Brawl, even though it doesn't have them all. So you could see what I was doing in the games at the same time. And then in Project M, I was doing the same thing. My Project M was crazy.
Going back to the 90s, they had attempted to shut down the popular Game Genie cheat cartridge, citing it as illegal derivative works on their software. Game Genie would fight back in court and win. Yet the legal defeat did nothing to soften Nintendo's stance. They would continue pursuing legal action towards projects using their IP, but would mainly aim their crosshairs on teams that lacked the legal resources to fight back. Project M exists in a legal gray area that would place it as a prime target. The mod is a derivative work built on copyrighted code and assets. Running it requires exploiting a vulnerability in Brawl's code, which directly violates Nintendo's end-user agreements. Up to this point, Nintendo hadn't formally addressed Project M publicly, but their actions made their stance quite clear. Posts mentioning the mod on Nintendo's social network Miiverse would get removed instantly, with the reason cited being criminal activity. One could argue that the numbers gave Nintendo legitimate grounds to be concerned. At nearly 1 million downloads and growing, Project M was no longer a niche curiosity. It was competing for attention with an official Nintendo release. Some form of response was inevitable, and Nintendo had a few distinct paths it could take. Option 1 was the most direct. Pursue the Project M team with a cease and desist, shut down distribution, and kill the project outright. But the Smash community loved Project M, and if the EVO 2013
Zippius, this is a I usually stream Melee, but this is a brand new video documentary that just came out.
Christian Taxman Whitehead was an Australian Sonic enthusiast and prominent figure in the ROM hacking community. In 2009, he created a proof of concept iOS port of Sonic CD and posted it on social media. Many expected a cease and desist. Instead, Sega hired him to build the official port, which shipped in 2011. And after years of continued work, he and fellow ROM hacker Simon Stealth Tomley went on to lead the development of Sonic Mania, a commercial hit widely considered.
I think it's better just to embrace it and be like, you know, use that, like, just hire the people. Like, you could literally just hire the people that make the ROMs, you know, and be like, oh, this is a talent. Work for us.
But this would be a hard no for Nintendo. Their position was that quality came from internal teams operating under their standards and creative control, not random developers who were actively infringing on software without permission. With option 1 and 2 both being out of contention, that left only one more, and this one would be a much more conniving one. After years of being ignored by the publisher, the Smash community was more than eager to finally have a relationship with their absentee father. That desperation to be recognized could be useful, and if they played it right, Nintendo could quietly solve the Project M problem without ever having to acknowledge its existence. Nintendo's sponsorship of Apex 2015 came with one notable absence. Despite Project M having a significant presence at Apex 2014, it was nowhere on this year's lineup. No official statement would explain why, and as 2015 progressed, major tournaments across the country would follow suit, quietly dropping Project M from their rosters. At E3 2018, Sakurai hosted a Nintendo Direct that generated some of the most intense anticipation the franchise had ever seen. This new game wouldn't just be another entry, it would be the culmination of everything the series had built. Every fighter from every previous Smash game would return. Characters that were thought to be impossible were added to the roster, and to top it all off, the wait wouldn't be long. Smash Ultimate was releasing that same year. Nintendo hosted another invitational alongside the Direct, and their community outreach had expanded significantly since 2014. Players, content creators, and tournament organizers were all invited as VIPs. The competitive scene was being outright
celebrated. And they also didn't invite me to this either. I was actually there in person, just hanging out with them. I bought a ticket just to hang out with everyone. But I actually was not invited to this either. You want to see my first Ultimate game ever, chat? I was forced to use a Pro Controller. I was forced to use an awful Pro Controller. I played my first Smash Ultimate match of E3 ever. That combo was my first 5 seconds ever playing Ultimate. Isn't that insane? I might have the best first 5 seconds in Ultimate of anybody in the world. I don't think anyone has a better first 10 seconds. Look at that. Oh yeah, and in Smash 4, oh yeah. I didn't know how to move because of the Pro Control. I didn't know I didn't know how to do everything. So I was just rolling because I was forced to use an awful controller. Like, no GameCube. I was like, what am I doing? Oh, yeah, and there's also in this game, unlike Smash 4, Smash 4 rolling is really strong. If you watch Zero's Diddy, he rolls a lot because it's a good movement option. It's not like that here. I'm doing the new mechanic. This stock, I'm testing out the new mechanic of running down tilt because I heard that you could do running tilts. So here's me testing out the new running tilt for the first time. I use it on the combo. I don't know how my stupid downer set him upward. Isn't that a crazy first match? Look. It was just a random guy, just random nobody.
While Smash's best players battled it out on stage, he was observing on the side, taking notes. For players who had spent years feeling like their creator wanted nothing to do with them, it was a really heartwarming moment. Reception from attendees at the event was overwhelmingly positive, and when Super Smash Bros. Ultimate released in December of 2018, it delivered on every expectation. Ultimate became the best-selling fighting game of all time, eventually moving over 30 million units worldwide. While the Wii U had an even worse performance than the GameCube, the Nintendo Switch was massively popular, giving Ultimate an enormous install base from launch. Smash 4 players immediately embraced it as a worthy successor, while Melee players found themselves willing to give the game a shot. For the first time since Project M, the entire Smash community had a single game to rally around. The timing of the new title also couldn't have been better. Smash players had grown into recognizable public figures, many of whom had substantial online followings and genuine commercial value to sponsors. As such, competition and content creation around Smash had never been more lucrative. The writing was written clearly on the wall. Smash Ultimate was going to be huge, and esports organizers were gearing up to take part in the action. And while some presented themselves as hungry entrepreneurs looking to cash in on gaming's next fad, others were the same recognizable faces who had their roots firmly planted in the community. VG Bootcamp, which had been around since the Dark Ages, was now commanding a massive broadcast audience across both titles. Beyond the Summit was another org that had invested into Smash early with Melee and was leveraging Ultimate's visibility to produce high-profile invitationals. But perhaps the most interesting player in the emerging ecosystem was a relatively new one. Panda, formerly known as Panda Global, had been founded in June of 2015 by Alan Samurai Panda Bunny, a medical doctor who had found his way into the competitive Smash community during the Brawl era. He had invested his own earnings to build an esports organization with genuine roots in the scene. What began as a small roster of Smash 4 players began to expand rapidly as Ultimate took off. Alan hired from within the grassroots community, and did so across every function: players, commentators, content creators, and even statisticians. Before long, Panda had built a fully operational ecosystem that was not only profitable, but trusted. It felt like visible proof that the community could use its talents and scale it into a profitable business venture. And Panda wasn't the only organization with ambitions to turn Smash into a legitimate Tier 1 esport. On March 1st of 2020, VG Bootcamp's Gimmer and Apostle teamed up with established tournament producer Justin Wachowski to announce the Smash World Tour, an ongoing global circuit featuring qualifier events across multiple continents, culminating in a world final. The structure was reminiscent of the MLG circuit from Melee's golden age, but operating at a scale that dwarfed anything seen before. Backing from Twitch and StarGG made prize pools possible that no grassroots Smash tournament had ever offered. There was one notable gap: the Smash World Tour was not officially licensed by Nintendo, the same absence that had complicated EVO and the Brawl MLG circuit a decade earlier. The ragtag group of passionate players who had kept the scene alive through the Dark Ages were finally on the verge of something that looked undeniably like a legitimate sport. But fate would have it otherwise, because shortly after the Smash World Tour announcement, the world would be reshaped by something that nobody could have planned for.
Across the nation, as the number of coronavirus cases soars above 3,000. Tonight, elected officials taking unprecedented measures to keep people safe.
2020 saw the global spread of COVID-19. What many initially perceived as a bad flu season quickly became a worldwide pandemic. Lockdowns swept across the globe, and large in-person gatherings were canceled indefinitely. For a competitive scene built almost entirely around in-person...
So, this actually screwed my whole life, because what happened is COVID happened, Echo Fox dissolved about a month or so before COVID. And then I was in talks with another tier 1 esport team to re-sign me for big money. Big money. And just before I signed it, COVID-19 happened and they canceled the whole contract. And COVID lasted 2 years. They weren't interested after it came back. And I haven't been sponsored since. I got screwed by bad luck and bad timing. And it affected my finances for the past 6 years and counting. With the stuff that happened with the community drama, cancel culture, Me Too movement, Mango's drama, the Hacks Money situation, like all the terrible stuff that's been happening. Sponsors won't even touch Cody, who's rank 1 in Melee. He's rank 1 in Melee, and they won't touch him. I had a sponsor who was very highly interested in working with me. They just wanted to see how the year played out. This was last year. They wanted to see how the year played out. That same year, the Hacks thing happened, and then the Mango thing happened. I never told them about the Mango thing. They found it because it was so viral on the internet. Like the Ludwig Mango thing, it was so viral on the internet that they found it and decided they didn't want to touch Smash. So if Mango didn't do what he did, I would probably be sponsored right now. Most likely. Not 100% guaranteed, but at least a 2 out of 3 chance being serious.
But if there's one thing Melee is known for, it's resilience. And in June of 2020, the community would receive a tool that would not only save it from another dark age, but would reinvigorate the scene entirely. Project Slippy was an emulator-based enhancement of Super Smash Bros. Melee that was publicly launched in 2018. The initial scope of the project was to capture statistics and replays for tournaments to improve their productions, but this scope would expand to something much more.
Slippy is so good because it's rollback, so it's so fucking good. You could play Smash Online with anybody. Unfortunately, at the same time this came out, everyone started being really toxic. I don't know if it's a coincidence in the timing or a correlation. I don't know. It could just be coincidence. But the online scene became like, we have the best tool in the world. Rollback Melee, what everyone dreamed of. And for some reason, everyone wants to just be toxic on the internet. It's like, come on, man.
Ambitious. Developer Fizzy would choose to leave his job to focus full-time on the project, and after months of dedicated development, the pandemic would serve as the perfect time to unveil the fruits of his labor. On June 22nd, Slippy Online would be officially launched to the public. This version provided a drastically overhauled online experience that was not only superior to Nintendo's, but could arguably rival most AAA games. Slippy would implement online matchmaking directly into Melee itself. Finding an opponent was now as simple as booting up the game through an emulator and then waiting a few seconds for the client to find an opponent. This alone solved the accessibility problem of old hardware. Melee no longer required a CRT or nearby players to practice. But the real breakthrough was in how the online play itself worked. Slippy implemented rollback netcode, an advanced system.
Spargo's the one player who I feel like could be good at anything. I think if Spargo committed to Melee, he would be amazing. But he doesn't want to, because he's already like super top at Ultimate. And rivals.
For the client to find an opponent. This alone
he's a once-in-a-lifetime talent. He's a once-in-a-lifetime talent.
Required a CRT or nearby players to practice, but the real breakthrough.
He's like me, actually. We just invested in different games. He's just like me, just with different game investments.
System that minimizes perceived latency by immediately registering.
Mainly because of the games we grew up with when we were growing up.
Next move and correcting any discrepancies in real time. Under even moderate connection conditions, these corrections are imperceptible. What this means is that online Melee was now robust enough to act as the substitute for in-person play. Word would spread immediately. Online tournaments were now accessible to anyone with a computer, and the player base that had been geographically limited for 2 decades suddenly had no geographic limits at all. Not only was Melee saved, but it had the potential to be bigger than ever before. The community was in celebration, but Nintendo was growing uneasy. While the relationship between Nintendo and the Smash community had never looked healthier on the surface, Slippy's existence, a fan-built tool that outperformed Nintendo's own netcode and ran on an emulator of their copyrighted software, was exactly the kind of thing that made Nintendo nervous. The community had once again built something beyond Nintendo's control, and as the summer of 2020 continued, one more event would transpire that would convince Nintendo that something needed to be done. The Smash community had been grassroots since the beginning. That decentralized, community-driven culture had produced something very unique and free from corporate influence, but it came with a major drawback.
The fragmentation and a lack of community leadership all around. I think it creates an environment where there's no accountability, and then there's no there's very few systematic ways for someone to feel safe, right?
With no formal accountability structures, bad actors within the scene could use their influence for misconduct and get away with it. And in July of 2020, the consequences of that became impossible to ignore. A wave of misconduct allegations were leveled against over 100 members of the Smash community. Some allegations involved some of the most prominent figures in the scene, players who had been central to the community for years. The community responded swiftly, enforcing widespread bans and beginning the difficult work of reform. Misconduct in gaming spaces was unfortunately not a rare problem, but the scale of the 2020 situation...
You know, I had to make a video on this because of fake false accusations. I had to make my own video because of false accusations. It's so sad. Not only that, so many of my friends got canceled. That people I thought were cool people and stuff, they just got canceled. Some of them deserved it, some of them didn't. A lot of them did, obviously, but yeah.
The official Big House Twitter would release a statement that would confirm some of the Smash community's biggest fears. Nintendo of America did not approve of the use of Slippy and had issued the Big House organizers a formal cease and desist, causing the event to be canceled entirely. The community felt betrayed. After doing the unprecedented and building a tool that had saved their scene, Nintendo wanted to prevent them from using it. The Smash community would let their voices be heard. Hashtag Save Smash would go viral across various social media outlets, with various other gaming communities and content creators spreading awareness and solidarity.
Communities, they don't care about communities, they just like to slap them around and use them. It's pathetic. They absolutely just slap around the people that really like their games. It's really sad shit, and Nintendo is just so out of touch with the world that it is laughable.
Popular streamer Ludwig, who had his roots in the Melee community, would announce an online tournament with a prize pool that would go to a charity of the winner's choosing. It was a tactical play, setting up another potential PR nightmare if Nintendo chose to get involved. In response to the backlash, Nintendo would issue a statement. They would confirm that the reason for the cease and desist had been over a dispute over Slippy, which the statement directly refers to as illegal. After contacting the Big House organizers to not use the mod, the organizers refused. Nintendo then stated that they had no choice but to step in and protect their intellectual property. Much of the grassroots community read that statement as Nintendo casting themselves as the victims of piracy, framing the scene that had kept their game alive as criminals. Whatever goodwill had survived the previous years instantly evaporated. Insiders, who had stayed quiet out of the hope that the relationship could still be repaired, decided that they no longer had anything to lose. On November 21st, former #1 player Armada would go on a live stream and detail Nintendo's various instances of hurting the Smash community throughout the years, such as with the blocking of MLG broadcasts and EVO 2013. What he would outline was a frustration the community had long felt. Why would Nintendo publicly claim to value the dedication of the scene while simultaneously making it harder to exist? 23rd, Twitter user Anonymous Smasher would create a twitlonger detailing how Nintendo had actively hurt the Smash community. The writer claimed to be an anonymous insider with intimate knowledge of the scene, and the post was careful to note that its claims came from word of mouth through individuals with direct experience in the matters and lacked any sort of formal evidence. But within hours, respected players, organizers, and figures across the scene would come forward to vouch for its credibility. The post had actually been written before the Big House had received a cease and desist, but after things played out, the insider lost hope that Nintendo would ever form a meaningful relationship with the Smash community, and what followed was the most comprehensive picture the community had ever seen of how Nintendo had operated behind closed doors. The key points for the post are as follows. Nintendo had always maintained public disinterest in competitive gaming. Executives would say that in the open. The community had mostly just accepted that. But what the post revealed was that Nintendo wasn't just declining to help the scene grow. They were actively blocking the organizations that were willing to do it for them at no cost to Nintendo. E-League was an organization that had brought Counter-Strike and Street Fighter to ESPN. They had attempted to get involved with Smash, but Nintendo would decline all their offers, only giving them the rights to rebroadcast the E3 Ultimate Invitational that they themselves had produced. ESL was another esports org that wanted to run a circuit, but despite the numerous attempts at contacting the company, Nintendo would completely ghost them. MLG, despite being burned by Nintendo's streaming refusal in 2010, had returned during the Platinum Age, even hosting an MLG event in Anaheim. Nintendo's response was to propose a $50,000 licensing fee per event. This number was absurdly high, and MLG would never host another Smash event again. And HTC Esports was incredibly interested in throwing a circuit after their successful HTC Throwdown, but would be asked to pause for a deal that was never finalized. In 2015, Red
Oh, hey,
Bull
that's me.
was to pause, incredibly interested in throwing a circuit after their successful HTC Throwdown, but would be asked to pause for a deal that was never finalized.
Dude, I've attended so many events. I've attended so many events. I don't even remember which one this one is.
HTC Esports was incredibly interested in throwing a circuit after their successful HTC Throwdown, but would be asked to pause for a deal that was never finalized. In 2015, Red Bull, Twitch, and Nintendo had been in talks about starting a circuit for Melee and Smash 4. Red Bull would do most of the initial work, but would eventually be cut off from negotiations and any future deals, leaving just Twitch and Nintendo at the table. From here, conversations would occur between Twitch and Nintendo for about 3 years. Twitch would agree to handle the financial costs, while Nintendo would own the branding of the league without having to contribute much themselves. The parties would come to a written agreement in 2018, but after all that progress was made, Nintendo would go silent at the last minute. The reason? When they re-emerged, it was to inform Twitch that Smash Ultimate was coming later that year. Their negotiations were now null and void, meaning that they would need to start the conversation over for the new title. Needless to say, this circuit would never come into fruition. The anonymous poster would make it a point to highlight how odd these negotiations were for a competitive gaming title. Usually developers would need to fight tooth and nail to get sponsors to sign on, but for Nintendo, they had multiple entities not only begging them for the rights to front the cost, but also do the legwork. Yet Nintendo would continually get in the way or drag their tail, and after years of this pattern, Nintendo had drained any sort of enthusiasm from external orgs. The true losers here were the players in the Smash community. Big events were being cancelled, and esports teams were dropping players as they no longer felt the investment into the scene would be worth it. The post would then go on to address Project M, and one of Smash's biggest mysteries would finally get some clarity. According to their account, it was true that Nintendo never made an official cease and desist. What they did instead was a bit more manipulative. They saw the community's desperation to work with the publisher, and would state that if organizers wanted to see a Nintendo circuit, they would need to drop Project M from their events. This reasoning would coincide with entities like VG Bootcamp and Twitch's decision to pull the plug on broadcasting the game, which only hurt their own viewership and attendance while casting the PM scene into the shadows. These claims regarding Project M would be further corroborated by Clash Tournaments organizer Chia and Smashboards contributor Smashcaps in a twitlonger of their own. Rather than enforce the hammer themselves, Nintendo had convinced figures in the Smash community to kill the mod for a chance to collaborate. This collaboration would reveal itself to be less so of a partnership and more akin to a hostage negotiation. A Nintendo license was less so of an endorsement, but more so of a promise not to cause any legal complications for the organizers. Despite the presence of Nintendo branding and advertising, no events had ever received financial support from Nintendo, with the best case scenario being some partial equipment. These claims were further corroborated when Sportskeeda interviewed Big House Tournament organizer Juggle Guy about the cease and desist and its aftermath. On the subject of decisions he had made to accommodate Nintendo over the years and whether any of it had been worth it, Juggle Guy was direct. Theoretically, we might have been better off 4 years ago if we had never answered those initial emails and never even partnered. But hindsight is 2020. I don't know if anybody could have foreseen that. The community had chopped off a limb for the opportunity to work with the creator, and in return, they were given permission to merely exist. #FreeMelee had garnered enough traction to be a big story for weeks, but unlike EVO 2013, Nintendo would refuse to back down this time, and after enduring some bad PR, business would continue as usual. The general masses would lose interest as it became increasingly clear that the Big House Online would not be occurring, and a new character announcement for Ultimate was enough to distract many. The Smash community would also choose to move forward, and as the pandemic began easing in 2021, in-person Smash tournaments began popping up again. Smash World Tour would even go through with its first iteration of the circuit, with the World Tour Finals occurring in December of 2021. Yet all the revelations had led to a major bridge burning. What once seemed like a budding relationship was now back to square one. Nintendo and the Smash community were no longer on speaking terms, and it would take a trusted third party to mend this shattered relationship. On May 26th of 2022, Panda would announce the first officially licensed circuit for Super Smash Bros. Melee and Ultimate, the Panda Cup. Many of the established tournaments on the event calendar would act as qualifiers for a final event that would occur in December of that year. Reception from the community was mixed. Some fans were optimistic, seeing the large prize pool and Nintendo's official involvement as a necessary step toward finally reaching Tier 1 esports status. Panda was a trusted organization that had grown directly from the grassroots scene and had established itself as a genuine community institution. To many, if any organization was going to have Smash's best interests in mind, it was going to be Panda. Others were not as convinced. After being burned so many times, many in the community were skeptical of any circuit with Nintendo attached, especially when so few details were given about how the circuit was actually going to work. There was also confusion as to whether having two competing tournament circuits would be healthy for the community. The community sentiments were perhaps best summarized in a Medium post by prominent tournament organizer and former Nintendo ambassador at Twitch, Crimson Blur, who wrote, "As you can tell, I don't know what to make of this announcement without a boatload more of information. Obviously, I worry about Nintendo's continued involvement in the scene, but I have enough respect for Panda Global's leadership that I'm willing to hear them out. Though it must be said that what I fear, over anything else, is that most, if not all of these questions will go left unanswered. Maybe because Panda feels it would jeopardize their Nintendo relationship, or maybe because I'm asking too many questions. But either way, we're left with this communal uncertainty, which is all Nintendo needs to slowly take the reins and use Panda's goodwill in the scene until it's dry. Here's hoping that isn't how this one plays out." As 2022 progressed on, the two tournament circuits would run in parallel. For the players who were interested in attending as many events as possible, two circuits meant that they had more opportunities to land a life-changing prize pot. However, for event organizers, it presented a bit of a dilemma, as they would need to choose which circuit they wanted their tournament to contribute towards. Having been around since the early days of Brawl, VG Bootcamp was the more established entity in the scene. The Smash World Tour also boasted a wider number of events across the world, featuring the biggest prize pot seen in Smash thus far. Panda was a newer player in the scene, but had established itself as a quickly growing one full of potential. Not only did Panda boast a healthy content network, but they would also provide broadcasting assistance to events in their circuit. Participation was varied, with some events choosing to go with Smash World Tour, while others opted for Panda. But no matter the route taken, competitive Smash in 2022 was forming itself to be one of the greatest in terms of narratives and fan investment. As the year neared its end, both circuits prepared for their respective finals, Smash World Tour Championships on the weekend of December 9th and the Panda Cup finale the following weekend. With the largest prize payouts in Smash history on the line across consecutive weekends, it was shaping up to be the pinnacle of Smash esports. November 29th, just 2 weeks before the Smash World Tour finals, the organizers would release a statement that would throw the Smash community into a battle for the soul of Smash itself. The post would begin with incredibly disappointing news for the community. The night before Thanksgiving, the Smash World Tour team had received a formal notice from Nintendo to cease operations immediately. Not only would the Smash World Tour Championships be cancelled, but so would the Smash World Tour altogether. This was a circuit that had connected over 6,400 live events worldwide in 2022, and would have featured the largest prize pool in Smash history at over $250,000. The culmination of this project would now never see its conclusion, and the statement would go into full detail on how such a devastating outcome had happened. When the Panda Cup was first announced, the Smash World Tour had been called into a meeting with Nintendo of America. They expected to be shut down. Instead, Nintendo told them the opposite. They had been watching the circuit's growth, appreciated that the organizers had avoided using any infringing material, and made clear that Panda's license was not exclusive. From there, the conversation would pivot towards talks of future licensing for Smash World Tour, and it was described as the most productive discussion the team had ever had with Nintendo. The organizers would leave the meeting optimistic that they could get a license for the 2022 iteration of their circuit. In continued conversations, Nintendo was being more transparent and collaborative than they had ever been, a positive sign that they had changed their attitude. It wasn't until details were finalizing around tournaments joining the circuit that a problem began to present itself. As organizers were being recruited for the 2022 circuit, many expressed hesitation. The reason they cited was Panda CEO Alan Bunny had been telling them that the Smash World Tour was going to be shut down in 2022, and that any event partnering with it was putting itself at major risk. Smash World Tour brought this directly to Nintendo, who reassured them that the two circuits could coexist, and that the Panda CEO CEO did not represent Nintendo's position. As March rolled around, Smash World Tour needed to announce their 2022 circuit. Nintendo wasn't ready to formally issue a license.
Voyager Cup by end of 2013. I was best of 3 games.
Pressed forward anyways, keeping Nintendo in the loop and narrowing their license goal to a single event, the December Championships. This was their only option if they wanted the World Tour to come to fruition in 2022. Simultaneously, Panda was aggressively recruiting events for their own circuit. When they ran into resistance from organizers who had already had broadcast deals with Beyond the Summit, the Panda CEO approached BTS directly, threatening to shut down their entire Smash operation in 2023 if they didn't hand over the rights. BTS refused to give in, and having built strong trust within the community, most events chose to stand by BTS in favor of Panda. Organizers were getting more and more concerned. MVG Bootcamp would reach out to Nintendo on behalf of the greater Smash scene, expressing concern about Dr. Allen's behavior. Nintendo would reassure them that Allen did not represent Nintendo, and that they too were disappointed in his actions. From there, conversations began to finalize around a license for the Smash World Tour Championships. Running out of options, Panda then turned their attention to events already on the Smash World Tour, hoping to snatch them mid-season. When that effort stalled, the rules would change. Panda altered their circuit to allow events to exist on both tours simultaneously, a flexibility they had never offered before. Nintendo, simultaneously, reversed their licensing policy. Events that had been told licensing wasn't possible were suddenly receiving approvals very quickly, sometimes even after public announcements for the event had already been made. This kind of grace was never afforded to the Smash World Tour team, who had been going slowly through the proper channels. The Panda Cup finale was officially announced in May of 2022. From that point forward, Nintendo's communication with Smash World Tour shifted from collaborative to near total silence. Months passed without a response in regards to the license, and the Smash World Tour team is eventually forced to announce their championships without one. After 4 months of no contact, Nintendo would finally reach back out. They would apologize for the delays, citing other commitments as the reason. They would exclaim that the behavior of Panda leadership was under investigation, as they felt the situation was complex and getting out of hand. Smash World Tour organizers became very doubtful that they would ever be able to obtain a license in time for the final, yet they had never imagined where things were actually headed. The next meeting with Nintendo wouldn't be until November, where they would still seem friendly and stress that they valued a relationship with the grassroots community. But that same month, on November 23rd, the Smash World Tour organizers would have one final call with their Nintendo representative. The representative would deliver some devastating news. Going forward, Nintendo required a commercial license for any Smash World Tour operations. That license would not be granted for the upcoming championships, nor would it be granted for anything in 2023. The implication here was simple. The Smash World Tour was shut down. When the team asked for reasoning, Nintendo said they couldn't provide specifics. The only direct answer given to them was that a working relationship between Nintendo and the Smash World Tour was now officially over. And when the organizers asked if Nintendo was aware of the fallout this would cause, Nintendo affirmed that they fully understood. The statement would conclude with the organizers stating their disappointment with Nintendo's shift in attitude, from initially wanting to support the scene to now going back to their straddling rules and communication. With the way things played out, they couldn't help but feel as though Nintendo had intentionally set them up to fail, and they would ask the company to reconsider their approach with the grassroots community in the future. And unfortunately, the fallout would extend beyond Smash World Tour itself. Gimmer of VG Bootcamp released an accompanying statement confirming that the cancellation had caused significant financial damage to his organization. Future events were now operating in legal gray territory, and to protect what remained, VG Bootcamp would have to cancel their major 2023 events. The future of the organization, the production company that brothers Gimmer and Apostle had built from nothing during the Dark Age, was now uncertain. The statement was perhaps the most significant disclosure the Smash community had ever seen, and if it was to be believed, then it carried 2 devastating takeaways. The first was an unfortunate confirmation that Nintendo hadn't changed. The company had continued the same pattern, stringing the community along, building apparent goodwill, then pulling the rug out from them at the last moment. Those who had been skeptical of a Nintendo licensed circuit seemed to be proven right.
I really hope, I don't know how many lessons it takes, I don't know how many times we have to go through this for people to understand that, like, our relationship with them, we should really treat it like, you know, an abuser, like antagonistic. Like it, yeah. Like it has to be that way going forward. It's been too many years, too many cases.
They've changed.
It's not even about them changing. It's that their interests are directly competing with our interests. It is not a marriage that can work. It's not possible. You can't make a deal where it truly works for both of us. What the community wants out of its tournaments, what it wants out of its competitive scene, is diametrically opposed to what they want. Like, they are not the same thing. They simply want a different world and vision for the scene than we do. Like, universally, like across every issue, from commentary to how sponsorships are done to how tournaments are run. You could go down the list. Everything they want is different than what we want. So how is that going to ever work? The answer is it probably won't.
But the second revelation cut closer to home. Panda had positioned itself as an organization by the community for the community. The circuit announcement had been met with cautious optimism precisely because of their involvement. To learn that behind the scenes, the company's CEO had been actively sabotaging other grassroots organizations and threatening event organizers into submission was absolutely stunning. LD, a co-founder of Beyond the Summit, publicly corroborated the accusations and made clear that BTS events would never be part of an Allen-led circuit.
But for the info and the receipts and the people who I trust who have spoken out so far, this is fucking huge news and devastating news for the Smash scene as a whole.
The story was one of the biggest controversies Smash had ever experienced, and the fan backlash was almost immediate. They needed answers. Who was responsible? That same day, a Nintendo spokesperson would relay a response to gaming news publisher Kotaku. Unfortunately, after continuous conversations with Smash World Tour, and after giving the same deep consideration we apply to any potential partner, we were unable to come to an agreement with Smash World Tour for a full circuit in 2023. Nintendo did not request any changes to or cancellation of remaining events in 2022, including the 2022 championship event, considering the negative impact on players who were already with Smash World to gaming news publisher Kotaku. Unfortunately, after continuous conversations with Smash World Tour, and after giving the same deep consideration we apply to any potential partner, we were unable to come to an agreement with Smash World Tour for a full circuit in 2023. Nintendo did not request any changes to or cancellation of remaining events in 2022, including the 2022 championship event, considering the negative impact on players who were already planning on participating. The statement was in direct contradiction to what Smash World Tour organizers laid out, suggesting that Nintendo had never mandated the cancellation of any events. The Smash World Tour team responded immediately, providing the written statement Nintendo had sent them following the shutdown call as evidence. It reads, "It is Nintendo's expectation that an approved license be secured in order to operate any commercial activity featuring Nintendo IP. It is also expected to secure such a license well in advance of any public announcement. After further review, we found that the Smash World Tour has not met these expectations around health and safety guidelines and has not adhered to our internal partner guidelines. Nintendo will not be able to grant a license for the Smash World Tour Championship 2022 or any Smash World Tour activity in 2023. Given that the Smash World Tour hadn't even submitted a 2023 license application and had been told explicitly that operating without a license was no longer an option, the community read Nintendo's public statement as intentionally misleading. Some players had already seen enough. Before Nintendo or Panda had issued any response, competitors began announcing they would withdraw from the Panda Cup finale in solidarity with the Smash World Tour organizers and broader grassroots scene.
I called Gimmer. I was screaming to him on the phone. I don't have that same energy right now. I said, look, Gimmer, if what I think we need to do in 2022, 2023 and beyond is basically we have our tournaments. If we get the C&D, then we turn the tournament into a protest. We turn the fucking tournament into a protest. What do I mean by that? Everybody still come. I want the stream to be on, and I want to be talking on the stream about the state of the world and how we're trying to come together to play some video games, and corporate America is like telling us that we can't. Are we going to see the police come in and take our CRTs away? No, I don't think so.
Others would wait for Panda to explain their side of the story, and on December 2nd, Nintendo and Panda would release concurrent statements. In a formal statement sent to IGN, Nintendo would offer more details as to their rationale. They claimed that Smash World Tour was unable to meet the health and safety guidelines for an officially licensed event. They would then double down and cast blame directly towards the Smash World Tour organizers for the cancellation, stating that verbally they had never mandated a cancellation. According to Nintendo, the Smash World Tour cancellation was done out of the organizers' own volition. The statement would end with Nintendo reaffirming their partnership for Panda, stating that the org had been a good advocate for the community. Panda would also offer a similar account, denying any influence over Nintendo's decision. They did, however, confirm that an altercation with Beyond the Summit had indeed occurred, and that their CEO had spoken unprofessionally. The Smash community seemed unconvinced. Nintendo's statement had a very careful language. The company never said they forced a cancellation, but even a surface-level reading suggested that what they had provided was an implied threat. With Panda choosing to stand alongside Nintendo, the community felt they had no choice but to boycott. One by one, major Smash players and influencers began exclaiming that they would no longer be attending the Panda Cup finale. In direct response to the statements, Ludwig would announce the SCUF World Tour, an invitational tournament that would be scheduled on the same day as the Panda Cup finals. Many of the players who were expected to compete at the Panda Cup would promptly agree to attend the invitational instead.
It's basically an effort at trying to do right by the Smash World Tour, and since there's not a lot of time left in the year, I decided to run it on December 18th. Hopefully there are no events that are running the same exact time as that, because that would be really unfortunate. It would probably collide in viewership a lot, but hopefully you guys check out my event, which will feature the 8 highest placing Smash World Tour competitors. So all these people for Melee, all these people for Ultimate, that's the idea. And what's the goal of the event? Well, one, to get as much viewership as we can over any other event that could be happening, because I want dominance in the scene. And also to raise money for VGBC and the Smash World Tour staff. Again, these are not huge conglomerates, not huge companies. They're not millionaires. The people running this are grassroots organizers who have been doing it for a decade, and they lost tens and tens of thousands of dollars having to cancel their event because the last second night before Thanksgiving news from Nintendo.
Soon enough, many of Panda's signed players and casters would also churn in a resignation from the company. Word from Alan was non-existent. Despite the scene wanting answers, word from insiders suggested that he'd completely shut down, even avoiding addressing the situation to his own employees.
Can you extrapolate on that being left out to dry? So basically when Panda started collapsing, our CEO played League of Legends for a full work week and didn't talk to any of our employees. So none of the employees who worked for the company knew that what was happening, and none of us had the level of the higher level of employment to be able to speak on the matter. Like, this was something that pretty much exclusively Alan needed to handle, and he just didn't. And look, maybe you cope in different ways. Like, I'm not here to rag on the guy for being overwhelmed and watching his company fail or whatever, but there are people who are at risk for this sort of thing, and that really sucks when people's jobs are on the line and you just don't do anything to help them.
On December 4th, Panda released a second statement. It denounced harassment toward its staff, announced a postponement of the finale, confirmed the organization was undergoing restructuring, and stated that Alan would no longer serve as CEO. Alan posted briefly to say that he had stepped down for the safety of his team, and that he would be releasing a full statement of his own in the coming days. The community would wait with genuine curiosity into how he might explain himself. Just 2 days later, the community would be given his side of the story. Alan's Medium post was much more of a dense statement than the brief one given by Panda. The statement would be met with very critical reception from the Smash community, with former Nintendo ambassador Crimson Blur making a 7-hour point-by-point critique of the entire document. To truly understand what actually happened, the whole story would need to be pieced together based on everyone's different accounts. The statement would open on a very somber note. Alan described the harassment, doxing, and death threats he had received in the days since the controversy broke, and took responsibility for his lack of action during the initial week. He apologized to his former Panda staff for not acting sooner. From there, the tone shifted dramatically. Alan's central claim was that the Smash World Tour's shutdown had nothing to do with him or Panda. He went further, alleging that Smash World Tour had essentially planned for this outcome from the very beginning. By launching without Nintendo's approval, he argued the organizers had constructed a situation where they either succeeded unlicensed, pressured Nintendo into granting a license, or got shut down and became community martyrs. In Alan's framing, VGBC won no matter what. He then addressed Gimmer, Apostle, and Justin directly. You do not and will not deserve the position of community dominance that you keep clawing for. And in what many read as a particularly pointed shot, he casts blame on Gimmer specifically for the sacrifice of Project M years earlier. You sacrificed PM, now your championship event, and you want to keep trying? The allegation that VG Bootcamp had deliberately sabotaged their own event required believing that VGBC and Justin had willingly absorbed massive financial losses as part of a calculated strategy. A follow-up response from Smash World Tour confirmed that a hotel block had existed for the championship venue, an unusual detail for an event organizer that allegedly never intended to run their event. Many would also dispute Allen's framing of Smash World Tour choosing to proceed without a license. While Allen would view it as negligence, others would see it as a fundamental lack of understanding regarding how the Smash community operates.
About it, but I don't. Again, he's painting this out to be a bad thing, but to me, this sounds like good TOing. Like, this is just saying, hey, we want to do a big project. We know Nintendo always gets in the way. We're gonna go and run the fucking thing, and if they try to shut us down, we're going to stir some shit. That's what we've all been doing for years, right? That is what he's describing is how TOs operate in general. Maybe this is part of like him not being a TO before this, but in general, Smash tournaments are unlicensed. Like a lot of them have been historically, right? Some of them have been licensed now in the more modern era, but in general, like, this strategy is all we've got, right? This has like kind of been our thing because Nintendo is so hard to work with. Like, what's wrong
Audio?
with this?
The statement would then turn its
You don't hear the
attention
audio?
towards Panda's relations with Beyond the Summit.
Something
Allen
wrong?
would detail how despite his insistence to cut a broadcast deal with Beyond the Summit, the company would continually show disinterest and choose to operate on its own terms. Allen would specifically call out Ken Hotbit Chen
That was
as
you?
being overly hostile in these interactions. Ken Chen would respond by releasing the full logs of his correspondence with Allen. What they revealed was a specific and significant detail Allen's statement had not fully addressed, the reason for their dispute. Allen had informed Nintendo of BTS's business model, after which Nintendo flagged as a legal gray area. Whether intentional or not, BTS had been put in a legally vulnerable position through Allen's communications with the publisher. This thread would end with both parties labeling each other as exhausting to converse with. Since there are no recordings of the calls that took place, whether or not an overly aggressive or hostile demeanor was used by any of the parties would have to be left to hearsay. Allen would then address the allegations that he had exhibited mafia-like behavior towards individual organizers to strong-arm them into signing onto the Panda circuit. To combat these claims, Allen would release written interactions he'd had with various tournament organizers. Although the conversations he provided seemed cordial, reception from organizers seemed mixed. Some would double down on the claim that Allen had continually stated the Smash World Tour would be shut down, even calling him manipulative. Others would state that working with Allen and Panda was a great experience. But interestingly enough, Allen himself would be the one to later confirm that he had indeed spread the rumors that the Smash World Tour would be shut down. Shortly after his statement, Allen would appear on the Visionaries podcast and reveal that he had insider knowledge on the situation.
Did you at any point say that you knew the Smash World Tour was going to be canceled?
Yes, and let me clarify this, okay? So, first of all, every TO in the beginning would ask me, you know, the Panda Cup's happening, right? What does that mean for Smash World Tour? I was then put into a position. Do I be honest with them? Tell them what I know? Or do I hide it from them?
And what did you know, to be clear?
So I knew for a very long time that Nintendo was not fond of the Smash World Tour and what they were doing. They came up in conversations before in the past Nintendo, and the words cease and desist were used multiple times. I was under the full impression that the Smash World Tour was going to be the target for one of Nintendo's few times that they were going to, you know, stop something from happening in the community. And they asked me. So like I said, I could have hid that, I knew, but I wanted them to trust me. Exactly what he's saying. I wanted them to trust me, so I didn't want to hide anything from them. I wanted to show them that this is what I know, right? I did not take any action to shut down Smash World Tour, ever, period, at any point.
Although Allen would frame this as transparency, it would be in direct contradiction to one of the claims he would make in his statement. He would state that Nintendo were genuinely caught off guard by the cancellation. But according to his statement in the podcast appearance, it was clear that Nintendo had always planned on taking action, thus motivating Allen to use that information as leverage on tournament organizers. But perhaps the biggest Rorschach test of the entire statement was the final section, a defense of his decision to partner with Nintendo. Alan's stated goal with the Panda Cup was to act as a friendly face that would lower the barrier of entry for tournament organizers to establish a relationship with the publisher. This would enable a more legitimate ecosystem that would allow players and figures in the community to build stable careers. Alan would assert that although challenging to work with, Nintendo had the community's best interests at heart. But Alan's vision of what Smash should become appeared to be a bit narrower than the community he claimed to represent. Multiple players and creators from the Melee community came forward to share their own experiences, suggesting that Alan's model may not have been in line with what the community had worked so hard to build.
And straight up, what Dr. Allen told me was like, yeah, you know, the thing is that I don't really believe in Melee. I just don't believe in Melee. Because numbers just aren't there. Like, I believe in Ultimate more because, you know, there's all these YouTube numbers, and then you look at Melee's YouTube numbers, and it's just not there. That, like, legit made me depressed for, like, a month when he said something like that. Because I was like, at the time, he's like, oh, respectable figure, you know, knows what he's doing, and, like, you know, he seemed like a smart businessman, and that made me depressed for, like, a month going further with Melee, because it's like, man, this guy doesn't believe in Melee. Who else really does?
And that was also a similar thing with Panda, by the way, too. Like, Alan straight up said to my face that he didn't think it would work, and he didn't ever think it could work.
In a follow-up interview with top player Hungrybox, Alan addressed the question of Melee directly.
Before this whole debacle happened and the whole statement came out and Smash Bros. Tour was canceled, you and I had a call. But during that call, like, I feel like you did express to me, you know, your honest thoughts about how valuable it actually is to have an esports team versus, you know, just a Nintendo partnership. And corroborating with Kadoran's statement that you thought there was no value in Melee, that was hurtful for me to hear because I know you've been in the community for a long time. So I want to know, honest and plain right now, do you actually believe in the future of Smash? And were you willing to continue having Panda as an org or not?
So, yeah, very plainly and clearly, any belief, any not belief in Melee is entirely about content. As a content creator like yourself who is moved from Melee to Ultimate for your content, it is specifically on YouTube that I'm talking about it. It just doesn't track on YouTube. And not believing in Melee is because I've invested, quite literally, millions of dollars into different projects and different things to help support the community. And the one thing that I could not get any traction on was Melee content. I will also say that scripted Melee content, I think, like, you know, with like fully produced sort of Melee content, I do think that has a place, and that does track well on YouTube. It's just a lot more expensive and difficult to make. But Juan, there's probably only a handful of organizations that have put as much time, effort, and money behind Melee as Panda has, entirely in my direction. Melee and the future of Smash is still bright. It still can become a tier 1 esport. Again, look at the actions, right, that I took, and see how that's inconsistent with someone that would not believe in Melee. I clearly tried to help wherever I could, and it's different being able to sell across Melee, you know, to sponsors and, you know, to on YouTube for content versus Melee as an esport. I very firmly believe in Melee as an esport. That's why we've had so many players. That's why we did so many things. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
More or less, but it did seem on the call that you were more concerned about, like, I guess the profitability of Panda rather than the team itself and the players themselves. It kind of made it seem like you weren't fully committed to the long run of having the esports org. But one other, I mean, yeah, I can.
Oh no, that was your perception. So clearly, that I said things that made you feel that way. You also keep in mind there's a lot of pressure on my shoulders to make a profitable company.
Whether the community had been in the right to cast blame on Alan would mostly boil down to what one chose to value about the game and the community. What was it that made the Smash community so special? Was it the ability to generate profit off of what most people consider a hobby? Or was it the people and the principles that held those people together? Later that year on the Lights Out podcast, hosted by Ultimate figurehead Iivisu, Allen would reveal many of the plans Panda had before the fallout and disintegration of his company. He would speak of the grandiose nature of the Panda Cup finals that never came to fruition, and advanced machine learning models that he believed could help elevate the game into the widest player base possible. He'd also reaffirm his belief that Nintendo had the community's best interest in mind.
It took me 3 years of work with Nintendo to understand Nintendo, but like, once you did well enough, it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't a bad thing at all.
Nice.
Yeah.
I actually think working with Nintendo helped our product become better.
His vision was enough to convince some that choosing VGBC over Panda was a major fumble in retrospect. What could have been a way to make the scene a Tier 1 esport was thrown away due to principles. But others, specifically in the Melee community, were now more vindicated than ever that they had made the right decision in standing by the grassroots scene. Although the employees of Panda were unfortunately affected, removing Allen was a necessary step to save the community. At best, Allen was a poor communicator who had misread the scene and was too inept to be a trustworthy leader.
This is like a project that was like being spoken about for years. Like apparently there's like, this is ongoing since like 2018, 2019. This wasn't something that like popped up in the span of like a few months, right? And my impression is that Nintendo probably finally came to Allen at the end of 2021 and was like, hey, we're ready, run this shit in 2022, which is a monumental task to turn that around in like just a few months, to have like a fully built out circuit operating in like the following year, which was only basically like a month or two away at the time. And I think Allen was in a situation where he was probably like handed the fucking golden key to like do it all, and was like, I need to make this happen by basically any means necessary, and took the route of like kind of lying and stretching truths and like telling people things that weren't necessarily true, vouching for Nintendo in spots where they didn't even know that he was saying those things, and like where Nintendo actually had completely different perspectives. Like he was doing all these things to try and convince people to join his circuit so he could get all together and execute it, which in my mind is like, it's understandable. Like if you have this goal and like this idea that the scene needs to be moved forward through a licensed circuit that you've been the opportunity to finally do, like I see why he like probably took this path in order to get there. But the idea,
Thanks,
like,
Gabe, that's
I
funny.
think the thing that gets thrown around a lot is like everybody is like, how did he not think this was like gonna get out? Like does he think like these TOs don't talk to each other? Does he think like nobody communicates and like passes on information and like makes sure things like all line up and like feel good? And that's like the surprising part to me, because I can't think of a single thing in Smash that has any sort of longevity that like started with anything but transparency.
And at worst, Allen was motivated by profits more than community, and put the scene in a dangerous situation by actively getting Nintendo involved.
Let's start with us and Nintendo. It's a toxic relationship. Okay, I know y'all know this now. In a toxic relationship, oftentimes there's someone in power who's something of an abuser, right? And then there is the other group who, for whatever reason, does not feel that they can get out of the relationship, when generally the goal is to get out of the relationship. But somehow in toxic relationships, they stick. They somehow stick. We, the community, us, to be in a good relationship with Nintendo, I think. We would love that. Wouldn't that be so nice? But for whatever reason, it's not working. We're somewhat out of relationship with Nintendo in that we had a number of events that were licensing or whatever with Nintendo, and that kind of went away at some point, and it was great. But then something happened. A bad actor came into the scene. This is my best understanding of Allen, is that this person is finding good contributors from the Melee community, putting money in front of them, taking their products and putting it together into something that seems centralized. Okay? So one individual came in and brought us back together. we don't even want to be together, but unfortunately it happened. Okay, so Panda was not acting in the best interest of the community. They had some ulterior motives, and so hopefully we're done with them. Okay, ideally we're done with the bad relationships. Like, that should be our goal.
But regardless of who the community believed to be telling the truth, the structural outcome was still devastating. Panda was now in complete shambles. The postponed Panda Cup finale would officially be cancelled, and with the unlicensed tournaments now deemed a gray area, 2022 would be left on a note of uncertainty for the future. Yet the scene would still soldier on and see the year through completion. And as a cohesive response to Nintendo, Mango would deliver a statement on behalf of the Melee community.
Just remember one thing. You can try and take our Melee away. You can take my controller, my GameCube, my CRT. I'll tell you something, I'll play Melee in my fucking mind. As long as Melee lives, I will play, and if you take it all, we'll fucking play in a garage. 20 people
that's
there,
a lie.
hot,
That's
sweaty,
a lie.
gross, me versus Zane behind a 7-Eleven for $25. And that's
100%
what it's always
lie.
gonna be. You don't understand that. The
Maybe
money,
Aaron.
the fame, nobody gives. Anybody who wants to be a top player gives no fucks about that. So if you try to shut us down, you'll never shut us down. You think you might, but I promise you with all my soul, you got nothing on the Melee community. These fucks are the cockroaches of esports. You try and kill them, they can't kill them. These motherfuckers just keep going, dude. So you can try. You're not gonna succeed, whoever you are. Just remember that.
I mean, it sounds good. It sounds good on paper. Like it's what people, like, he's saying what people want to hear, right? But like, as the past year and a half has taught us, that's obviously not true, because he contradicts himself in the past year and a half with his more recent statements.
Well, I have no intentions of ever playing Melee again, unless I desperately need money. So if you see me entering Melee, just know I need money.
Around the corner, it was uncertain if Nintendo would enforce their legal hammer on ongoing events. But as the year played out, many events would go on to run as scheduled without any issues. In October of that year, Nintendo would publish the Nintendo Community Tournament Guidelines, a series of regulations that would place restrictions on not-for-profit small-scale tournaments run by individuals and involving Nintendo games. The guidelines included prize pool caps and limitations on commercial activity, which would be met with immediate trepidation from the Smash community, but the existence of the tournament scene would remain largely unaffected. Yet the wounds from 2022 were still being felt. The broader esports world had also begun declining. Investors who had poured money into competitive gaming during the boom years were failing to see returns. Organizations folded, and many Smash players were an unfortunate casualty. But as Melee approaches its 25th anniversary, the passage of time has introduced a quieter challenge.
January 26th, we had a baby. So I'm officially a father.
The college students who once raced to find CRTs on the street are now adults, with families, careers, and responsibilities. Even the game's greatest competitors are facing hard questions about what it means to dedicate your livelihood to a retro video game.
This is all real. I'm moving back to Australia, and I'm no longer playing Melee at all. I don't know what the future holds or what job I'm gonna do, but it's been an awesome ride. I'm gonna try my best in 2026 and practice as much as I can, but there's no huge, massive reason for it to happen. I just kind of see, like, a lot of the people that I grew up playing with are no longer playing, and it makes me sad. And I want to spend time with my friends at home who are still my friends who I made through Melee, even though they don't play Melee anymore.
Perhaps the Smash community as a whole is just forever meant to be at odds against some force that doesn't want it to succeed.
Continue.
Who owns Melee? Ask any IP lawyer, and the answer is simple: Nintendo. But despite the game's enduring audience, Nintendo has never re-released or ported Melee to any of its newer consoles. The publisher that owns the game shows no interest in making it more accessible. Ironically, they may even see it as competition to their newest title.
The removal of EVO. EVO 2013 took place in July. If you look at that year, what happened June 2013, that was E3. That was when Nintendo announced Super Smash Bros. Wii U and Nintendo. That was it. That was the reason why it was removed from EVO, is because Nintendo was announcing a brand new Smash Brothers, and they were tired of the focus being on 2 games ago.
While Nintendo's active involvement in the newer title makes more sense, many onlookers have been incredibly confused as to why Nintendo has chosen to ever get involved with the Melee community when they seem to care so little about the game or its preservation. While Nintendo themselves have never really provided a reason directly, members of the Smash community have put forth some theories. The anonymous Smash insider would posit that Nintendo has always benefited from stringing the community along. The reason is mainly for publicity and marketing that the community provides. Competitive Smash is far from the sole reason the games sell well, but there is no denying that the exposure provided from the competitive scene and its influencers is an added bonus.
We are this awesome opportunity to be a marketing vehicle for all the other games. Because if you just look at Smash Brothers, right, like it's by design so perfect to be joined with, whatever new game or no IP comes out.
Yeah.
Yet in their attempts to get involved, many have posited that Nintendo's inherent instinct for control is what has continually put them at odds against their greatest devotees.
Being able to make the scene in the shape of their own image, right? That's the ultimate goal. That's the end all be all of what they want out of all this. They want the control to be able to make it Nintendo friendly and make the scene an appropriate marketing vehicle for their product marketing arm. That's like the goal, right?
Perhaps that same instinct for control comes from the same nerve that allowed them to become an industry titan, but also cost them some of their biggest burnt bridges. What about Sakurai, the man who put himself through immense pressure to deliver a game that is still being actively played a quarter of a century later? During the Brawl era, he viewed Melee's competitive depth as a flaw in his creation, but later interviews suggested that his relationship with Melee had evolved to something closer to acceptance. In a 2015 column responding to a question about Melee's continued popularity alongside Smash 4, he wrote that it made him very happy to see people still play it and appreciate it, even saying that players really understood the concept of Melee correctly. But perhaps Sakurai's recent thoughts on Melee are perhaps no better illustrated than through the lens of his YouTube channel, Masahiro Sakurai on Creating Games. The channel is Sakurai's outlet to reflect on his time as a game developer and share his learnings with the gaming world. One of the most interesting series on the channel is Game Concepts, where Sakurai deep dives on each of the 12 major titles that he's worked on. The entry for Melee sits at the shortest runtime of the 12, a mere 4 minutes and 18 seconds. Despite the popularity and legacy that Melee has garnered over the years, Sakurai had surprisingly little to say about it. Sakurai states that the design concept for Melee was extremely simple: power up his original creation. The short runtime is mainly spent talking about features like trophy mode and some of the novelties of developing on the GameCube. Sakurai never acknowledges the game's competitive merit at all, and in his conclusion, Sakurai remarks that while he thinks the game lived up to its high expectations, only those at the time would really know. The video makes one thing very clear: whether or not Melee was an accidental masterpiece, Sakurai has clearly moved past it. He saw Melee through the lens of a game designer who was given a task, delivered on it, and then moved on to the next project. Who owns Melee?
You just got up smash. And now. Oh, happy feet. Wombo combo. That ain't Falco. That ain't Falco. Oh, 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 oh.
Speak about Melee today, and it's likely not about trophy mode or break the targets. The language of Melee doesn't come from the manual, it comes from the community who discovered and coined techniques as their own. Matt Deasy's Shine, the Ken combo. Much of what has made Melee Melee and such a celebrated game over the years hasn't come directly from the game itself. It's been built by players who continue to dedicate themselves to it. So why Melee? Why dedicate yourself to a game whose publisher ignores it, whose creator has moved past it, and whose future forever resides in a constant struggle to survive? The answer is quite simple. It can even be stated using straightforward business acumen Nintendo themselves would be very familiar with. Melee has no market substitution. No other game has ever been able to replicate what makes Melee so special. Sakurai himself has no interest in trying. And while many other projects have attempted, with some of those even being fantastic products in their own right, they're still unable to capture the same fervent devotion. Even Melee's most devoted and talented fans always find themselves creating something different. So what is it about this game that makes it so unique? Part of it is in the details. Nintendo's constraints placed Sakurai in a position where he couldn't second guess himself, and Sakurai's skill as a designer produced a game that, whether intentional or not, is rich in player expression. But the other part of the puzzle is how players have actually taken the game and used it as a means of expression. The tense competition, the rich and vibrant culture of the Smash scene, the everlasting friendships that can persist even when GameCubes don't. Those are the parts of Melee that ensure that the game's not just alive, but growing. Said differently, Nintendo and Sakurai made the art, but it's the community who's continually showing the world why it's a masterpiece. Melee's gameplay is often compared to jazz, but perhaps its community better resembles punk rock. It lives and breathes defiance, the same defiance that Sakurai injected into Smash's DNA when he first built his prototype in secret. The same defiance that for a brief moment possessed Nintendo to disregard the rules of their business and take a chance on the vision of a creative. And that same defiance that compels the community to express themselves through that vision, even when the world seemingly says they shouldn't. The story of Smash is one of resilience, a game that was never meant to be art, and a community that formed around it, continually seeing the beauty in it, even when its creators don't. But make no mistake that the story is also a tragedy, because Nintendo and the Smash community have always shared the same goal, creating a way for people to find human connection through a video game. They'll just never agree on how to do it.
No! Oh, it's so long. You didn't die. Now you died.
All right. Wow, that was a long video. I was watching this for 4.5 hours, probably. Like, I was watching this for 4 hours for a 2-hour video. That was well put together. And I hope you guys like my insight. I gave a lot of different insights to different things over this past 2 hours. If this gets on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell icon, all that stuff. And I do coaching and all that stuff. Just read the first 2 pages of my Google Doc here. All that. Alright. It'll be in the description as well. Alright, let's, I'm gonna get a drink downstairs, BRB.